The meeting to order, it's 6:01. We have our minute taker and we'll do our best on time as always. First, we have public comment. If we have anyone online, just raise your digital hand and then we have people in the audience. Nancy?
No online?
Not yet.
Okay. I'm thinking about the part of your agenda later on tonight where you're gonna be narrowing down the list of options for further study for possible implementation in 27, 28. And I wanted to say that I'm hoping that option A.1 will remain on the list going forward, especially around further study and ways to approach that model with a cost-effective mindset. So that's one thing I wanted to say. And the other thing I've been thinking a lot about, partly because of the work I used to do when I worked in education, is that I've been thinking a lot about what you're hearing from teachers on the advisory council about the grade banding options and the clear message that they are sending, that they're wishing for more collaboration with same grade teachers across the district. And I just want to say that that is such an important message they're sending. And I can see lots of opportunities this year and next year for providing those opportunities for same grade collaboration through how professional development days are used, through how early release days are used, through ways to shift things around from time to time so people cover classes so that same grade teachers can visit each other's classes in other schools. And that professional development work structured carefully with teachers providing the clear sense of their goals in those encounters. That professional development is some of the best professional development we can provide because we have some excellent teachers in our district. So I'm just saying, we don't need to close schools to provide more opportunities than we've been able to provide up till now. And I hope that the board and the administration would take seriously the opportunities to do that sooner rather than later.
Thank you, Nancy.
Hi, Jeff Dunham from Starksboro. I had a similar comment about keeping option A1 is it on the table. And actually similar thoughts about looking for other economies. And the obvious one is if there's vacancy here at the school, move the superintendent's office here. There are vacancies in some of the other schools, maybe some of the staff members could easily work, separate from the superintendent's office, especially if they frequently visit that school or live in that town. I think there are a lot of opportunities there. There might even be opportunities for combining some staff functionality, not only here with some of the superintendent staff, but also maybe in some of the satellite, elementary schools with a few of the superintendent staff members that are now centered there. They still could come back for meetings and that kind of thing, but and maybe even if you're not already doing it, consider some hybrid working, with more work at home, so there's less need for office space.
Thank you, Jeff.
Karen McCarthy, Starksboro. I would ask that you please honor the democratic process. I understand there are some communities that would vote in favor of closing their school. And maybe the finances can be considered that if that was honored for those communities, they could move forward with that plan and the district could reduce those economic costs, but also honor the democratic process and what's valued by the communities. And so I just ask you to consider that.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room?
I want to thank the board for putting so much time and work into examining options for our district. And for soliciting feedback from community members and from staff. Regarding staff feedback, I want to state that we teachers are not formally endorsing any of the options that have been presented. Because for such a complex issue, there's a wide range of opinions about what would be best, and it would be disingenuous for me to try to present a single standpoint that captures this range. And I should say, I'm saying that, I had a list of all my different roles, and I think by now most of you know them. I'm a fourth grade teacher at Bristol Elementary. I'm a Moncton resident and taxpayer. I'm a parent of 3 children who are either currently or have been students in this district. And, but I'm here speaking as co-president of the Mount Abraham Education Association, so. So I talked about not wanting to endorse any particular viewpoint. If you ask, I always say, if you ask 10 people, you'll get 10 opinions. But there is a point I'd like to make about all the proposed scenarios. Many teachers were dismayed to see that, just as was the case during budget planning last year, the deepest proposed cuts once again are to teachers and other staff who directly work with students. Now, I know that teacher salaries and healthcare, of course, take the largest piece of the pie budget wise. But it was, we were just made to see so many deep cuts to direct student supports. You know, we made a more formal presentation last November about the budget at that time. And I was looking it over, many of the points are just as relevant this year. The MAEA, or Education Association, believes that the greatest priority must be placed on direct student instruction and related supports. And as such, student-facing positions should be preserved to the greatest extent possible, even if that comes at the expense of programs that are positive and beneficial, but not absolutely essential. We feel strongly that as reductions are made, they should be made across the board, including at the district central office, at the school administration level, planned improvements to facilities, and extracurricular activities that are outside of the school day. We closed last year's budget presentation with the following thought, and I do so again tonight. We urge the board to put the needs of students first, minimize reductions that will directly affect student learning. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Any public comment from online? I don't see any at this time. So we'll move down to our first action item, which is to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion, please? Meredith first, Kathy second. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Next is the consent agenda. Can I please get a motion to approve? So moved. Melissa first. Kylie second. Any discussion? For minutes or for pay orders? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next we'll move down to the executive limitations monitoring section. The first is an action item to accept the ends monitoring report. So that includes 1.1 through 1.3. So Meredith first.
Second.
Justin second. All right, discussion about the end monitoring report. Yeah.
Patrick, can you define proficiency? And is there a standard definition of proficiency that is uniform across all schools in Vermont?
You have me until the very last part of that statement. We can define proficiency. We have done a lot of work to define proficiency across the content areas in MAUSD. More work to do. That curriculum work is never done. across Vermont, there is effort underway as part of Act 73 to create graduation standards for the state. Whether that's proficiency based or not, uncertain. What those proficiencies are, like where that will go is unclear. But that will be sort of the closest to some sort of a common expectation in Vermont. Right now, the common expectation in Vermont is that everybody has graduation standards.
That's it, that's where. Because when I look at in the code proficiency and above, looking at the ends report on page 4. And throughout the report, it references MAUSD against Vermont, so that's why I was wondering if proficiency was the same throughout the state.
On that particular assessment,
Yeah.
it is defined the same because it's the same assessment throughout the state.
Okay.
So a score 0.3 or score 0.4 is proficient or above, and then below that is. But that's specific to that one assessment.
And when I look at these numbers. I guess I'm just positively floored that 50% of college students don't meet proficiency. Or more. I mean, it's hard for me to start to enter into the budget process. And look at these outcomes as they're measured by a uniform test, and we all know that they have difficulty. But how do I justify the budgets that we're presenting with this kind of an outcome? What more can and should we be doing, I guess, is my question.
I mean, I think that characterizes the challenge that's before us, really, right? Like as the financial constraints continue, how do we utilize dollars in ways that pursue improved outcomes for students? That's the task. So it's been our task most of the 10 years I've been here, is how do we do more with less? And we've had two or three budgets in my time here where the subsequent budget spending, overall spending, was less than the prior year's spending.
Mhm.
Which is pretty unusual in schools around Vermont. It's not often that a school spends less next year than they do right here.
So when I look at, again, we're on page 4, and the purple chart. See that? So I'm looking at 2025. MA in the top column to grade 3, MAUSD math proficiency, only got 30%, whereas, just 2 years ago, we were at 47, and yes, classes are different. I understand that the composition, but those numbers straight down the column pretty much paint a not rosy picture for our district, and so we're spending more and more money and getting less and less. What are we supposed to do, and how do we answer to the taxpayers in this district?
Yeah, I think the sort of what I've been messaging for a while now is our approach of doing sort of less of the same things we've been doing as an endeavor to improve outcomes is not a great strategy.
I think we'd all-
It gets complicated from there in terms of, so how do we do things differently then? In pursuit of those improved outcomes. And I speak to that a little bit in the summary, ensuring a really strong foundation of our MTSS, which is that core instruction, remains the most important thing. That is the foundation of ensuring our students are successful. A lot of different ideas and thoughts and opinions about what it means to strengthen that core instruction. But I don't think any disagreement that is critical. From there, ensuring that we have the proper resources in place for students that need something more than that core instruction, with targeted intervention from licensed professionals that are experts to deliver that something more than core instruction for students that need it. And then for the students with even greater needs, that there's a more intensive intervention still from licensed professionals. In addition to the targeted intervention and in addition to the core instruction, it's not instead of, to help meet that need. That that structure of support is critical, and figuring out ways to bolster each of those tiers of our multi-tiered system is still the strategy.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Kathy, I really appreciate, the way you were framing that. I think we need to be a little careful not to beat up on ourselves too much. You pose it as, well, so what can we do to change this dynamic? And I think there's only so much we can do. We could try hard, we could try to redesign things, try to reimagine things, make the best use of our money as possible. There's a sizable segment of our problem that might be beyond our control. And I'm looking at myself, right? And what's going on in Montpelier. And there have been a lot of trends over there that I think have made it difficult for local districts to make do with what they have and achieve the goals that they want. So I hear you, and I think you do need to think about, as much as we can, what we can do here at a local level. I just caution, don't beat up on ourselves too much, because there are some factors that are just beyond our control, I think.
other thoughts from board members?
May I just follow up on this one? I think it's like a useful metric, but it also raises questions to me about like kind of the degree that the students who are not meeting efficiency are, how close are they to that? Right, in other words, it's kind of a binary classification, did you meet grade level or not? For those who aren't meeting grade level, we have a sense of how far away they are. Because if it's really that they're mostly right there, then it's a much smaller problem than if the 50–60% students who aren't at grade level are 2–3 grade levels behind, instead of just at the threshold where they don't get counted. I imagine this is kind of it's an all or nothing, you either made it or you didn't, but you could be either side of that and basically be the same level.
I have been, sorry, no, so glad you brought that up, because yes, there is so much to unpack in sort of these bigger picture assessments that we share with you in this particular report. That yes, that analysis of how close, where was the bar, how did the norm line change from last year to this year? What was Katrina's progress from where she was last year to, what are the other data sets that Katrina has that are showing different parts of the story? So the unpacking that happens at the school level, at the classroom level, at the individual child level, goes much, much deeper than what we provide, obviously, to you. If you look at this with more of the lens of what's the health of our system, I agree, it's not as healthy as I certainly would like. Both Patrick and I worked in other districts where these numbers were higher and you feel better about them. And we also recognize that there's a lot more to the story and what can we do. So, but I appreciate the sentiment that, yes, there are kids who are right on that cusp and kids who we're monitoring who have come a long way since the score 1 point that they got last year. And now they're like a 2 point, almost 3.
Thank you.
So I think I have a unique perspective on this data as a former special ed teacher and as somebody who used to work for a normed assessment company. If you look, yeah, I know, right? If you look at, used to, not currently. If you look at page 5, Mike, you can see our breakdown in proficiency among students receiving and not receiving free and reduced lunch, as well as students receiving special education services. And there is a sizable, statistically significant gap at just about every grade level that is very much exacerbated when you look at special ed. The good, not good news, I mean, it's bad news, but everywhere in the country has similar gaps. I think what's unique about MAUSD is that we are in the top quartile of spending out of any district in Vermont, which is one of the most expensive states to educate our children in, and that Vermont spends more per student on education than just about any other state in the country. So I think what's a really interesting question to ask ourselves today is, how are we spending our money? And does it make sense to continue spending on our money at a really high level, higher than anywhere else in the country, on services that aren't closing the equity gap and that aren't leading to higher levels of proficiency. And just want to throw it out there that our teachers are amazing, and I'm so proud of our teachers for all of the work that they do.
Patrick, we're providing free lunch to all children, correct, in the district? So why are we still collecting data on free or are we still collecting the data on free and reduced eligibility?
We do still collect income information from families. There are different weights that are provided for students that fall below the sort of income threshold still, so we do still collect that information. It's collected differently than it was several years ago. But it is still collected, even though there's free lunch for everyone.
We toiled over, to your point, changing the title to income eligibility, which is really what it is now. It's
Yeah.
really not free and reduced lunch. I toiled over that for a couple weeks and decided to keep it status quo, so you at least folks who kind of compare year to year kind of know where we're talking. But in the future, I'd love to use the more broad metric calling. Yeah.
And important to note that that threshold impacts the reimbursement rate for the school.
That was the next question, so.
And an added challenge, right? It used to be necessary to complete that paperwork to get the reduced or free lunch.
And now it's,
Now you get it whether you fill the paperwork or not, so getting the paperwork is tricky. And it's still really, really important information for us to have, and it has implications on the whole district for all the reasons we discussed.
It'd be helpful to reframe that when we start sending it out. Those that, right, like it's confusing.
Yeah.
Got that at the beginning of this year, too. I don't need this, just something to think about.
Yep.
Any other thoughts? I have a couple of them, but I just was waiting. Oh, okay, okay. So there was a section and there's sort of like a return on investment. And the source of evidence was approved annual budgets. And I wondered about that only because I think there's more proof that could be baked into that section in terms of like, kind of along the lines of what everyone else has been bringing up. Are we seeing what we think we're gonna see based on where we're spending money? One thought that came to mind was the All Learners Network for math, right? I know it's only been in, this is the second year,
Third year.
third year.
Actually, fourth year.
current ones.
Lord, okay, so fourth year and our math scores are lower. And I wondered about that. I don't know if it's a change in process. I know the cohorts change because this isn't year over year, right? But I do wonder about that, and why, and so. Throwing that out there, loud ball, right? And then I wondered, like, what are our other ways of knowing if students are doing well, if our return on investment is doing well? So, our continued, putting student-facing positions into the budget and keeping those in there. How do we know if that's working for students? Do we have any SEL data that would tell us that keeping our teachers there is doing well? I was looking through like the school highlights and what's working well and trying to get a good gauge on like, what are we seeing as things that are student facing that are really killing it? And so I just wonder if there's more ways that you could advocate that the money we're spending is doing what we're hoping it's doing. And if it's not, then to that point of like, where should we put resources? That might be a way that we're able to do that. And then, as always, I was just looking at the behavior stuff. And when it says meeting behavior expectations, what does that mean? And what is that measured against or with?
That's looking pretty specifically at Swiss data, I think.
Okay.
Kind of get to that section. Yes.
Yes.
Bottom of page 9. Yeah, so the graphs on the bottom of page 9 are specific to major behavior. Bottom of page 9, the graphs are specific to major behavior infractions, as documented in our Swiss behavior system. So these are office discipline referrals that are put into the system by teachers, administrators, support staff, a host of folks, but this focuses on just the major infractions.
Which we described to the left of the table, right? So
Right.
these are things like physical aggression, defiance, or eloping, which leaving an unsafe space, or leaving a space unsafely.
So
Yeah.
am I reading this right, that in last school year, 20% of all sixth graders had 6 or more referrals for major behavioral infraction, and 46% had 2 or more?
Yeah.
Well,
20,
No,
adding-
20
adding those
adding
together.
them,
Oh, yeah.
Or more,
adding them
yes,
together.
yes. Yep.
I wondered about, do you guys use Panorama or, okay, um. How much?
We use it 3 times a year as
Okay,
a.
so the standard screener.
Yep.
Okay, I wondered about. I wonder about that, and I wonder about this in terms of ways of knowing, only because this is like tier 3 break in my mind, right? This is like kiddos who might reach that tier 3 system of support. And if we're trying to figure out or look at the whole system, I know this is like 6th and 12th grade, but if we're trying to look at the whole system, I wonder about disaggregating that screener, or even further, if you guys use it that way, to just say like, what are the skills our students identify they have, and then what are we doing to manage that gap? I just wonder about how do we bulk up what we know and how we're using this to inform the decisions that we have to make here, and that would feel helpful to me as someone who exclusively does that. So that we understand a little bit more the health of our students from lots of vantage points.
Our hesitancy of sharing Panorama data is mostly because we've only been using it for a couple of years. K2, it's a teacher survey, so it's pretty subjective.
Yeah.
And then the 3
Yeah.
system, right, the 312 is student reported.
Yeah.
So we're still kind of navigating how to best ensure that we're getting the most honest feedback from kiddos. And internally using it like crazy,
Sure.
exactly as you
Yeah.
just described,
Yeah.
right? So we're using our data systems and combining it with our information for sure,
Yeah.
at a kid level, at a cohort level, at a grade level. How to report out on the panoramas, I've still felt a little uncomfortable about it, only because I'm worried about the validity still at a large level.
I hear you, yeah.
So, but yes, we're
Yeah.
using it exactly the way you just described, which is super helpful.
Even if it comes with an asterisk that says
Yes.
self-reported, right, because like you can break it out by grade, right? And so you could say 6th graders out of the 5 skills, only 40% say they have this SEL skill. That would tell us a lot about what are we missing,
Exactly.
right? What are the gaps? And I wonder and worry about that as we're thinking about what is the shift in education we're delivering. If that shift isn't gonna make any of that better.
Yep.
Right, and I just don't have that. I think it'd be nice to have next.
I think where the panorama data will come in to play for you all to see more explicitly will be in the strategic plan work. Right, because it's needs. So we're using that data to actually change what we're doing.
Yeah.
So it's more of a means vehicle than it is an ends vehicle. And I think to be able to explicitly share that, I think the vehicle might lie more in the continuous improvement plan process and strategic planning. But either way, if the board decides to interpret, same with return on investment, I just want to back up to that comment too. The board only has one measure under return on investment, and it's, did the voters approve
I
our
know.
budget or not?
Yeah.
If we want something else, well, let's define what that is,
Yeah.
and we'll work to get that for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
I just worry about the expectations related to behavior. And what are our expectations? Right, what does that mean? And if our expectations are, we're not doing these major things, okay, well, we nailed it, right? We're doing okay. But if our expectations are a little bit deeper than that, I'd like to see the evidence that shows that we're meeting the expectations and what that means. So just fodder, right? Things to
Yeah.
think about as we move forward. And then the transferable skills part, do kids evaluate themselves? Or who's evaluating the transferable skills?
So the data that you see on the transferable skills is specifically from Mausd. And that those are part of their coursework. So those are being evaluated through their teachers.
Okay.
There is an opportunity for self-reflection through their PLPs.
Okay.
And then at the K-6 level, we aren't yet being as explicit in collecting assessment data on the transferable skills yet. A little bit in effective communication, that one area right now, because it dovetails so nicely with reading, writing, and a lot of the things we're already doing. So the things you see above that at the K-6 level are more related to standards that were identified through the grade level expectations.
Okay, and is any of this, as you're thinking about strategic plan, so on and so forth, going to shift because of the portion of a graduate?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, okay,
I mean, that's just talking.
well, right,
I'm excited to revitalize and freshen up that.
Okay.
For sure.
okay.
And I would say the report as a whole, right, to organize around portrait of the learner and the new ends is an opportunity that we'd want to seize for sure.
Any board members online have any thoughts they want to share about the ends report? No?
Yes, this is just.
I don't know if the district looks at it like this, but do we track, and I realize that the grades change, kids move in, kids move out, but like grade 3. The cohort that was in 3rd grade in 2023. Do we follow them to see how their scores are, that grade 3, the next year's grade 4, where they're scored, like to see if there's at least. Not a decline, like steady or go up, like do we look at that data?
That's the first place I go with this is to try and
Yeah.
follow that cohort. If they were third grade in 23, I look at 4th grade in 24, 5th
Yeah,
grade
like
25, you can
want-
kind of see a snippet here, but.
I guess then how do you use that to inform?
Apologize, I'm driving, but I am listening. But I don't have a lot of comments to make right now. I will say this, and it's only from personal experience. My concern has always been that often the data from grade schools don't seem to actually follow the kiddos. And I know that's not just with my kiddo, but it's been many kiddos, especially around math. So I don't mean to dispute what you're saying, Patrick. I just heard you say that, but that is not always the experience I think that every family is having.
Like if I follow grades. Oh, no, I can only follow them for 3 years, never mind. So it looks like ELA 39. The next year they were 62. Oh, my fingers are working correctly again. And then in 54, right? So we had a nice uptick in 24, but then quite a decline in 25. So that's why, like, right, that's what I'm trying to get at.
And what I found when you're looking at data at this level, the best thing it can do for you is raise questions. It doesn't usually answer many questions. The answering of questions comes from the drilling down and unpacking, like taking a look at that cohort. What do we see about that cohort? Drilling down to individual students and what are we noticing in terms of growth or lack thereof in individuals. So that work absolutely happens. You know, we've talked in previous meetings about our data days. That's evolving. We're getting more efficient with our use of data. We're working with a new tool this year, EduClimber, that is sort of a greater warehouse of all of the data that we collect. It's still a little clunky as we're trying to get it up and running. But trying to get useful data at pretty fine grain levels in front of people that are working directly with students, that are supporting the people working directly with students to make informed decisions based on the data. And data plays a very significant role in our multi-tiered system of support.
Liz?
I appreciate the plan to become compliant with ends. I think it's really, I hope that community members also take time to read that. It says a lot of really important things in there. I appreciate acknowledging our challenges. Um, most concerning achievement gaps for students from economically disadvantaged backgrounds and those receiving special education services have persisted and in some areas widened, right? Like you really call it out in the bullets of, I think this is really relevant for us, more affordable to taxpayers by eliminating inefficiencies and aligning spending with impact, more effective for students by ensuring that every child has access to strong core instruction and timely expert intervention, and more supportive for teachers by creating sustainable roles, collaborative structures, and professional conditions that let them do their best work. So all of it is really well written, and I appreciate the summary and the intent to get closer to where we want to be on behalf of our students. So thank you for the report.
There's something significant that happens between seventh and eighth grade, well, besides the age. I look at the data between seventh and eighth grades and there's, a significant drop there. In that transition from seventh to eighth grade, almost across the board if you follow it. Across a 3-year span.
There's nothing I could put my finger on specific to the transition of seventh to eighth grade, except for everything, as you described, right? That time in developmentally. I think what lies in here is more around the needs of a cohort, the structures and supports of the system. I don't think it's anything magical about going from seventh grade to eighth grade. That's not typically, Trina can correct me if I'm wrong. In terms of an expectation standpoint, that's not like a significant transition point from seventh to eighth grade. Like there's not a notable jump in expectations and to meet proficiency at that point.
The only thing I would add would be, and I think we've talked about this in different annual meetings like this, where we talked about this report, I think there's an element of assessment fatigue at eighth grade. They also have to do the science assessment. Seventh grade does not have to. When it's a NAEP year, they also have to do the NAEP assessment, right? We're giving this in the spring when there's other sort of end of classroom type assessments. So we've heard from different teachers and folks who have said that is a lot on eighth graders. So I would just add that piece. It's not that the expectations per se are any more rigorous, but there is a lot that's happening during the window of time that these assessments are given.
So knowing that, is there any way that we can change the point at which they're given to alleviate that stress for the student?
We've done what we can with the parts that we have control over in terms of our screeners, like Aaron brought up the panoramic windows. We've played around with different timings of the ones we have control over. Yes, we've definitely played with some different things.
But we have very little say over the VT cap assessment window. The state says this is the window.
This is it.
Our only say is when within that window do we want to give it.
Liz, is your hand up from before? You're all good.
There's so much information in here to unpack.
Yeah.
It's a great report.
Well, and part of what Katrina and I talk about often is like, in many ways, this is really very high level information, and you could take any line from any one of these things and spend days digging way down in and trying to understand at a granular level, what we do differently to improve the outcomes. And that is work that is ongoing. But difficult to try and capture in a snapshot in a report like this.
Can I ask one last question? Looking at page 5, it looks like Moncton's scores are quite a bit higher for ELA, for both grades 4 to 5 and grades 5 to 6. And first of all, shout out to the Moncton staff. So just curious, what's Moncton doing in ELA that's working so well for them?
I think this has come up in the past, and part of it has to do with the socioeconomic status of that town compared to others, right?
Moncton is at a little different place in that regard than the other three towns are. That is true. From a curricular and instructional standpoint, there really isn't anything different. Like we're really pretty unified around the district in terms of the materials, the instructional time, support around practices, et cetera. So I couldn't point to anything that stands out that Moncton's doing something different than what other schools are doing. When we do sometimes pilot, like somebody will try something new, and we look at the results from those efforts, and if it looks promising, that tends to be something that we seek to replicate across schools. Sometimes in more of a ground up way, and other times more of a whole scale, like, wow, this is amazing. This seems like something we should be moving in. I think maybe Katrina mentioned, did you mention UFly earlier?
Maybe last time, but not.
Okay, so UFly is a new sort of public program, phonics program that we're implementing this year that was piloted, and we saw great results, and teachers were really excited about what it could do. And so this year is sort of our first year with teachers across the district using it. And we're looking to see how that data changes as a result of those efforts. So that's one example of the ways we look at this to try and improve outcomes across the district.
Thinking. And just to add, when we say we, oftentimes, I mean, obviously, we have teachers all across the board. Having 4 distinct elementary schools and trying to connect dots like that happens with the instructional coaches. So I just want to be clear that we have 5 of them, and they try very hard to say, oh my gosh, this is working really well over here. You might want to try this. How can I cover your class so that you can go see what's happening over here? So I just want to give that a little nugget for everybody, so you know what their job is like. When we say we often mean that.
Meredith, what I was getting at is if you look at page 14. Talks about looking at the. Economics and disability. And there's definitely gaps identified. And I remember this question came up, I think last year, and Mike Lansing was here. And that was the point he had made, which then Patrick kind of reflected again this year on page 14. Into the Riley.
We do try to invite the administrative committee to this particular annual meeting, but we thought they put in some hours last time, so we gave them a bye. But in the future, we will try to have them here to answer any of those more school-specific questions.
We also looking at data on like the IEP side, this, I'm not educated in this area, so I'll probably say something wrong here, but like assessing the kids, like from when they get on them to their progress, maybe when they don't need it anymore. Like, how was that information? I didn't really see that called out there. I'm just curious, because we keep talking about how those who are receiving those special services are scoring here versus here, like those that aren't, but then we're not looking at that data also in isolation.
So we for sure are looking at that data at the school level. One of the challenges we have in reports like this, with a district our size, we run into a situation where we can pretty quickly get to a point where sharing information becomes identifiable. So we try to meet a minimum N size, like so number of students that we feel confident doesn't identify. And so that's why when we're looking specifically at students with IEPs, it's as a group of students that you see here. So the number's large enough that there's nothing identifiable.
I think it would just be, maybe not getting identifiable information, obviously don't want that. But understanding kind of to Kathy's point earlier about where we're investing money, time, etc. Those services are immensely important for our students. And I'd want to make sure that the time and resources that we're spending on those we're seeing that improvement with that group of students. So understanding that, I don't know, it's something to think about, right? Like I know this could be a 3rd grader and it could be an 8th grader, and those are completely different populations, but how do we look at it or get that information back from the administration in a way that the board can digest it? I don't know the answer, so lob that one over to you.
And the answer is not clear to me either because of the challenges with N size to get to that kind of granularity, but we continue to think about it.
Oh, maybe Liz has a brilliant idea.
Liz?
And then for several years, we talked about how to get alumni reports in here. And I really appreciate how many there are in the stories that were shared. They were very nice. So I just wanted to thank you for that as well.
Oh, Liz, there's 4 of them. I never do 4. I couldn't take one away. Thank you for saying that, because that was a lot of type. They're so good.
Any other thoughts? I'm just gonna bullet point condense what we said to add it to our official response. And you tell me where I'm right or wrong. So we talked about things like other ways of knowing, so what other evidence could be added to places. We talked about, sort of the proof of where we're spending our money and is that closing gaps for students? And then we talked about other assessments, other ways, it's a lot around like, how do we know? Were there other things that felt important beyond how do we know and are we spending our money wisely as the 2 sort of buckets? Okay,
Maybe just the overall recognition, as Patrick points
Yes.
out in the back, that there is room for improvement.
Yep.
Right, that despite best efforts and then beyond from the district and the teachers. That we can objectively look at this and say, we'd rather not be here, we'd rather be somewhere else. And how we're gonna get there, I think, is obviously the big question. But I don't think this summary that's presented across all of these metrics paints a picture that we're where we want to be educationally or behaviorally, I think in some ways. And we know that that's always the case, that we're always looking for improvement, but this, I think, spells out the need for being thoughtful about how we go about that.
Patrick, have the teachers asked for any one specific thing or a couple of specific things that would help you drive a better curriculum or more productive curriculum successfully?
I mean, I think the U-Fly example I gave is one.
Yeah.
Like, it was teachers saying, wow, this feels like something that
We can grab.
could be really powerful. We'd love to utilize this, and it's now happening. And there's a lead group that is substantially, if not mostly, teachers in the leadership group.
Led by our K2 instructional coach, and there's an administrator on the team, but the rest are classroom teachers, representative of all the elementary schools. They took about a year and a half to do a curriculum study on what would help us address the gaps in early reading, foundational phonics instruction that our previous program wasn't getting us. So they took a long time and really studied and have been leading the effort going into this year. So we're very excited about it. It's got its bumps, newness always does. That's what, when you said EduClimbers clunky, I wrote down EduClimbers not clunky, we're clunky, trying to figure out like what the tools can do and what's there for us when we have changes to what we were used to doing coming our way. But I think there's a lot of positivity on the horizon.
What is the specific plan going forward for math? We addressed literacy. What about math?
We've actually addressed quite a bit in mathematics instruction over the last 4 years with ALN's support. Again, investing in All Learners Network is great, and for the investment, it really comes down to a day of coaching from an ALN coach in each school. So it's really what happens in between those visits that we're trying to bulk up with the other support folks, coaches and colleagues that we have to help fill in those gaps. And we started very specifically with math menu, which is one component of 4 within an ALN math structure. And now we're trying to sort of make sure we've got all the edges put together. So yeah, there's no change in program per se. It's more about how are we utilizing instructional strategies in a way to meet the learning targets that we've identified in our curriculum.
I would offer one of the challenges as well for many of our teachers, not all, but for many of our teachers, we just talked about literacy and math. I'll acknowledge there are other subjects, but if we just took literacy and math for now, when we engage deeply with All Learners Network for a year, 3 years, 4 years, teachers that teach both literacy and math kind of have to pick, what am I gonna dive into this year? So if they've been for 4 years really digging into the math work with ALN, there hasn't been as much time and support in literacy because those two things happen on our early release days at the same time. They can't be in both places at once. They may partner with a coach around literacy in an area where they're not focusing on our early release days. But that balance of like, how do they continue to deepen their expertise in two different areas simultaneously is a challenge for some.
And there are only 7 early release days, and they are essentially 2 hours and 45 minutes long. And that's when people can come together. So that's a challenge in and of itself. They don't happen every month. So again, to the conversation about if I'm the lone kindergarten teacher in my building, that's the only time I get to have. I mean, there are definitely creative things, to Nancy's point earlier, that happen school to school when possible to offer release time. Subs are a shortage, so trying to figure out a way to give them more time together while the plane is flying has always been a challenge. But that is how we use our time.
I don't know if you can answer this question, but do you think grade banding? Oh, gosh.
That's exactly what I was gonna help. No. Is there data that proves that the grade banding actually enhances?
That was a huge conversation with the advisory council the other day. There is not, we have not yet found anything conclusive, as any search you want to do, something might disprove. We are pretty small, so to try to find something that fits our context is rather challenging. I would just offer that grade banding isn't just, I mean, it's wonderful that I can be a kindergarten teacher with 3 other people around me who also teach kindergarten. But the other beauty of having folks who teach the same grade level, same subject area, is that you can actually share kids too. It's not just about coming together and talking about curriculum, it's also, wow, I have a small group that really needs this. So why don't we put those two together and do that during our win block, or do that during our math menu time? And now we can actually get what they need with people who aren't now spread so thin that they're trying to manage 20 different groups, when really they can share with their colleagues who need something explicit. So having taught in that way myself for 15 years, was the beauty, was finding ways in which I could use my colleagues to actually divide and conquer and get the kids what they need in that realistic time, not talking about it next month when I see you at ERD.
And I would just add, I believe many teachers, it's certainly clear from the advisory council, that they believe grade banding supports in a lot of these areas.
Okay, I'm just gonna wrap up this part because we have all the opportunity to talk about these ideas later, and I think it's a good platform or a launch point we have with this report. But want to wrap this part up. So based upon the information provided, does the board find that the superintendent's interpretation is reasonable? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 Does the data demonstrate accomplishment of this interpretation? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor of accepting N's monitoring report, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Thank you. We'll move down then to the financial report, the update, even B.
I'll share a couple of things to start. We have a typo on the operating statement. It says, in the revenue side, prior year fund balance applied to fiscal year 25, that should say 26, and it should be 0, what's in there. Additionally, on page 1 and 3, you see some numbers that are large and outliers. And if you compare some of those positives and negatives, you see it's more of we've yet to be able to, we've encumbered money and not yet applied it to the exact line it should be. For example, in the 1100s, you see a negative 457. on tuition to in-state, and just below it, out of state, you see a positive 783,000. So that's just an opportunity for us to determine where exactly those funds are gonna end up as we go forward. In the 1,200 numbers, under special education, we have a $466,000 shortfall on professional education services. But if you go to the 2,100 block, which is support services, we have a $475,000 positive. Again, we know we've hired and are encumbering money for these services. We're not yet sure whether or not they're going to come under support service or under special ed, and how that would be either applied or possibly reimbursed by the state. So we're early in the season to have been moving those. You'll see journal entries over the course of the next few months to get those in the right spots. Additionally, back to the operating statement, you see an outlier on building improvements where we're $1.3 million beyond our budget. That reflects the 2.1 million that we committed from 25 to cover costs that we knew we were going to incur through the summer. So we're really still in fairly good shape with the building improvements in a total budget standpoint. Well, I'll pause there. Please.
Okay. On the balance sheet, thank you for that summary. On the, can you help me understand under payroll taxes and benefits payable, we have a negative, I'm gonna round up, 1.4 million. That shows an asset and a liability section, which would mean it's a debit, so there's a credit somewhere else. Help me understand that, sir. Please and thank you.
Help me to get me to the right page that you're looking.
Sure, I'm on page 3 of 13.
Sure.
I'm in the current liability section on the payroll taxes / benefits payable line. The negative 1.36 million.
You're in the operating statement. I'm sorry.
No, I'm on the balance sheet.
The general funds expenditure sheet or the operating statement?
No, the balance sheet.
Balance, I'm sorry, I'm getting there now.
Got it,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm with you.
Well, then I'll bring my laptop over.
What page are you on?
Page 3 of the financial report. Fantastic.
That's the funds that we carried from one year to the next. For accrued benefits.
It straddles the calendar year and we're on calendar year, so that'll shoot down. So what's the other side of that?
So if you look at that same number
Yeah,
at the end of last year.
Yep.
It slowly decreases down as we go through the year.
January through December. So the other side of that is sitting where? Where's the other side of that entry? Is it encumbered on the P and L as benefit cost?
P&L is a cost.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
No, thank you.
I'm there. Well, I hope that made sense to everybody.
Yeah.
It just looks funny when you see a negative in the liability section. That's actually an asset, so.
I think this was a question last year as well.
Probably,
Yeah,
in my memory, fading fast. That was it for me. Thank you.
it will look better in a couple months.
Okay, I'll keep an eye on it.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So will I.
Any other thoughts on that report?
I have a quick question, Floyd, on page 1 on the expenditures. We spent roughly $770,000 on in-state and out-of-state placements.
So are we looking at under the 1,100 direct instructions? The negative 457 and the positive 783?
562 and 560.
Yeah.
Yeah,
On page
one, yeah,
under the 1100s.
yes. Tuition, to approved in-state,
Oh, it's page 5 of the PDF, but page 1 of the detailed report of.
tuition to out-of-state schools, $783,771. How many students are? That's a lot of funding right there. How many students does that reflect?
Well, that number hasn't been encumbered,
That's the budget.
right? So that number, 783. Is the amount that we have in for approved out-of-state tuition. And we've yet to apply any funds to that. So that's a positive number. The number just above it, the 457, is funds that we've applied to in-state. So when we're building this budget, we don't know whether these students, we know we're gonna have students that we're going to have to outplace. We don't necessarily are able to currently put a name to them and where they're going. So the question that you're asking, how much per student, and how many students? It is typically a number that has great volatility. If we send one child to an out-of-state district, it could be $300,000. So there's a number, placeholder number, not knowing who and where and when that student is. If we may have somebody who moves into the district and we haven't identified them and placed them in held money in the budget for that. That we now don't have the money for. Now recognize additionally that when we have a really large expenditure like that, that's when we will then submit that to the state for the extraordinary reimbursement, which runs at about 95%. So if we don't spend the money, we're not getting the revenue either. And if we do spend the money, then we're going to see a 95% of that revenue back. I feel like I'm smoke and mirrors with this because it's a big number that we need to have in the budget. And if we don't use it, we also don't have the revenue to offset the expenditure. Does that make sense? I'm not sure I'm explaining it particularly clearly, but it's the way the the special education extraordinary expense reimbursement structure works in the state. Once you pass a threshold, we start receiving revenue at 95% of the expenditure. So if you have a student and it starts at 65,000. So if you have a student that costs $65,000 under the special ed piece, it's a general fund hit or under the special ed piece. But it's still one of the dollars that come in under the special ed block grant. We will see nothing coming back from that. That same student at $300,000, well then 240,000 of that will be reimbursed as revenue at 95%.
so we just put a place, basically, this is a placeholder, if you put in almost $1 million.
It's an expectation based on history on what we spend in that.
That's part of the challenge. So if you can imagine right now deciding how many students are we gonna place out of state next year. That's the task before us in building our FY27 budget. And so we do the best we can with the information we have, and that changes. So we may right now think we have 3 students that might need to be placed out of state next year. And between now and next year, 2 of those 3 move to a different school district in Vermont or not. And we have the money in the budget to account for that now we don't need because they're no longer in MAUSD. But to Floyd's point, that doesn't, if we're budgeting a large expense like that, we're also budgeting a large revenue coming in to offset that. So the impact on the general fund isn't that full $750,000. It's only the difference between that 3/4 and what we thought we'd get for revenue, which is most of that 3/4. So it's a much smaller impact on the general fund than it appears just looking at that line.
Thank you.
Liz?
I think it's interesting because that's why they're looking at it at a state level, right? And for us in our conversations, it's interesting to think about what would make an impact on our ability to meet students' needs in our own district and not send them out. But what do we have to have what they need, and we have to be able to offer them what they need in order to do that. So how do we create those circumstances?
And just to clarify, if we're, when we're talking about that particular line out of state placement, that means we've utilized all of the resources we have available to us in MAUSD. We've reached out to partners or perhaps even had the student in a program in Vermont somewhere that's in state but out of district placed that was insufficient in meeting that particular student's needs. And now we're at the point of looking outside of Vermont to find a place that meets that level of need. So there's quite a process that is involved to get to that point where we're talking about out of state placement in particular.
And Patrick, you're talking about out of state residential placement most times.
Yes,
So
I'm not aware of a circumstance where it's been out of state that's not residential just because of the logistics of daily transportation to a different state. I suppose if you're right on the border of a state, then there's some possibility there, but I've not experienced that.
Well, and that's why when the question comes up, like, what would we need to do to have that? That would not be something we would entertain. I mean, I'm much more familiar with New York system, but we, school districts cannot create these very unique residential treatment opportunities within their district. It's just not possible.
Okay. Any other thoughts about that, or can we move down then to the superintendent's report? A, B, A. Oops.
Restarts, things like that.
Any thoughts on the superintendent's report?
Always fun to read.
Always fun to read.
Yeah, right.
Pictures are so cute. Thank you for putting it together.
Any other thoughts? Okay. Move down to the fun stuff. For board management and governance, the first one is a discussion of our policy A 4.5. The code of conduct that was listed in there is actually the one that was written previously. And I wrote one for October 2025, so it spanned August to October. And this is in response to our discussion last meeting. And we always have the job under policy and governance that if the board itself finds it is not following its own policy, that we check ourselves against that and we write a monitoring report that outlines where we didn't meet our own policy and we move forward with that understanding. So we have gone against our own code of conduct in a few ways. The first point is that the board commits itself and its members to ethical, businesslike, and lawful conduct, including proper use of authority and appropriate decorum when acting as board members. That's number one. And we find that we in the past have been able to do that, be respectful, honorable, and upstanding. And each year at our annual reorganization meeting, we share resources with new board members that give them the ability to educate or re-educate themselves as what the appropriate role of board members is, what our governance model is, and what our process is. And 8.4 includes that code of conduct. And we've sort of gone against that standard. We haven't been professional and upstanding and holding ourselves accountable. So I reported partial compliance between August and October. The second bullet point is that members must demonstrate loyalty to the ownership. Yeah.
The document that I pulled up from the agenda
Yes,
is the May monitoring report?
yes, that
Or
would not,
you've been referring to
a new,
something in October?
yes, so I did a,
I just haven't seen that.
correct,
Okay.
yep, that's why I'm reading it up.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see.
Um,
So you're reading
my monitoring report.
that we're going to be asked to do something about tonight?
So I'm putting it out there as ways that we've gone against this code of conduct. It's a way to check ourselves. And then our goal would be to use that information to then just move forward. This is a check and balance against that. We have the duty to hold ourselves accountable for
Sure.
when things aren't going the way they're supposed to go. This is just that accountability piece.
Right, because otherwise the monitoring report wouldn't be due again until May 25th, and that's too far in the future.
Correct.
But
I say I fully understand, but why don't you continue?
It's a, do you want further explanation?
Uh,
The,
I don't know what we're doing here.
what we're doing right now is we're checking ourselves against monitoring report for 4.5, the code of conduct. Because some of the behavior that we've been doing has gone against this. And it's our job to hold ourselves accountable for when we go against our own policies and procedures. So either Patrick can do that by submitting a monitoring report to us, or we can do that to ourselves. And say, hey, I think these things are going against a specific policy that we have in place for ourselves. That's what this is calling that out, giving ourselves the opportunity to check ourselves against what we've been doing and then to move forward to remedy that and maybe not end up in these situations. Again,
And that is what we decided to do last time we met.
right. So. Number 2 is we must demonstrate loyalty to ownership of MAUSD, unconflicted by loyalties to staff, other organizations, or any personal interests. Our interpretation is we act as trustees of MAUSD and we show loyal to that and the students in the community, and our loyalty should take priority over other loyalties to staff or organizations or personal interests, and we have avoid conflicts of interest. And board members, my evidence is board members must regularly choose to make decisions and work towards decisions consistent with MAUSD values and goals. And over the past 2 years, we've largely reported compliance on this topic. Since August 2025, evidence has surfaced that goes against this. And this can be that remarks had been made that directly demean our administration, which leads to the disintegration of public trust that we have built over the last few years.
Are we on number 2 there?
Yep, number 2.
And you think that comes within the term loyalty?
Right.
you think?
Okay.
This is an opportunity for us to talk about it, if you'd like to talk about it.
I frankly don't understand. But why don't you just continue and we'll
Okay.
take it from there. I mean, part of it is that I try to prepare for these
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah.
And so this is just all new, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to follow it.
And that's fair. Yep.
It was mentioned in the board notes that we would discuss this policy.
I'm sorry?
It was mentioned in the chair notes, that we would discuss this at this meeting with regards to.
Oh, sure, but that's a very different matter from presenting some proposed findings with proposed evidence, I think. The chair notes, I think, were talking sort of a general matter, but why don't you just continue and we'll see where this goes.
Okay. Number 3 is that members must avoid conflicts of interest with respect to their fiduciary responsibility. We've largely been able to do that in my interpretation. But we avoid conflicts of interest, which means that we're careful to avoid a situation that's believed to create a risk for our organization. We've largely done that, the fiduciary part. Because we disclose all our stuff. Number 4 is board members may not attempt to exercise individual authority over the organization, which means that interactions with the superintendent or staff must be recognized. The lack of authority of one individual board member. Our interactions with the public or press or other entities must recognize the same limitation. And except for participation and board deliberation about whether the superintendent has achieved any reasonable interpretation of the board policy, members are not express individual judgments of performance of employees or the superintendent. Our typical board process is that we consolidate requests for information and then we come to a consensus as a group to determine which of those requests to bring to administration. This usually helps us manage individual requests and allows for the board to revisit and further discuss topics together. In the past few months, the amount of individually requested information has increased significantly and largely been upheld. We've largely given that information. But the board chair did have to manage those requests by ending singular requests and bringing all topics to the board table in 2025. That was in September. And the other evidence that we could add was from the top with the disparaging comments of our administration in public forums. Number 6. Yep. Please. So did I skip 5? Yeah, sorry, thank you. Number 5, we respect the confidentiality. I think we've been pretty confidential about all legal matters, contract issues, staff issues, and personnel and evaluations. I haven't found any evidence between August and October for that. Number 6, board members acknowledge that the way in which they choose to exercise the right to express personal views can affect the board's ability to work together effectively. Because we aspire to honor the right of individual members of the board to communicate with community members when information is shared and make every reasonable effort to protect the integrity of the work of the board. Board members often participate in discussions and share their personal views about issues and outcomes, and policy governance allows us to have established common guidelines about how board members do that, especially with administration staff and the community. The board continues to invest in continuing education on policy governance to strengthen our skills in that area. Our practice has been that board members support the authority of the board when speaking in public or press, even when the individuals disagree with that final determination. In August and in September of 2025, several board members had made statements that misinterpret the board's work and the directives that were given to the administration for assistance with that information. And then 7, members were properly prepared for board deliberation. We largely do that. Same with number 8, which is members will support the legitimacy of authority, the final determination of the board on any matter, irrespective of members' personal position in the issue. The only evidence that would go against that is the aforementioned evidence, which is public comments misinterpreting some of the board's work and directives.
Which item are you talking about then?
That was number 8.
And well, I'll wait. It's very hard to follow what you're saying.
Essentially what I'm calling out.
Because, I haven't been able to see it in advance.
Yep.
And some of what's being said is fairly conclusory, right? In other words, not specifying. I mean, we talk about evidence, right? But I'm a lawyer, right? Evidence means something to me that's fairly factual. So I'm just having trouble following this.
If you would like me to revise the report to call out specific incidences and board member names, I can do that.
I'm not asking you to do anything.
What I was hoping for is that we would take the generalities that I offered and use them to move forward so that we don't repeat what we've been doing going forward. We speak as one board voice, we uphold that, we don't give disparaging or whatever comments about our administration and our staff. Those are things that we all agree to in the movement. We haven't done that between August, September, and part of October. This is an opportunity for us to check ourselves and do better. That's what this report is saying.
Yeah, the difficulty I'm having is that I hear what you're saying,
Mhm.
Aaron.
Mhm.
There might be different interpretations of the factual issues.
Sure.
And so I just don't know how to deal with that.
Do you wanna talk about that now or at a different time?
I don't want to talk about it. We got a lot of good, important things to do
I know.
tonight. And,
I mean,
listen.
this was fully discussed last time we met in executive session, so I guess I'm a little confused about what we're questioning the facts for. And I would have to pause and say that I hear we have more important things to talk about, but I really think that this also is important. And we had the opportunity to talk about it. We were presented with evidence which was taped and available. I guess I'm just confused. And I feel like, this is a great way for us to document how we want to improve and what we want to do differently as a team moving forward as a board. And again, we're stuck this board meeting as well. And we were in executive session and we had the opportunity to talk about all of this and there was an agreement at the end. So I'm a little
Yeah.
frustrated that I'm back on that. I just have to voice that for whatever it's worth.
Yeah.
So Erin, are you reporting that in items number 4 and number 6 that we're in non-compliance?
Mm-hmm.
I have a question.
Yep.
3A says, members will annually disclose their involvement with other organizations or with vendors. Any associates that might reasonably be seen as representing a conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Do we have a formal process for that?
There is no formal process. Usually in the like at the reorganization meeting, there's a form that I think you fill out that would offer
Maybe I just
that.
forgot.
That's fine. But we
We
don't
had a
ask for
baby.
that over time. Like we wouldn't ask for it every month. example,
Yeah, it says annually. I
Yeah,
just,
we do. Yeah, we do.
and annually made it seem like it was formalized, but I didn't remember.
Yeah,
That's all.
that is. We don't ask for it all the time, though. I did provide in the evidence that there has been some demonstration allegiance to other organizations, but largely in compliance. So we can, I hear, Sarah, that you feel frustrated by it and the questions. I do think it's fair that this wasn't offered in terms of you all reading it beforehand. So I'm happy to send it out under separate cover and you can digest it. And if you have further questions, we can have a separate conversation about that.
Thank you, Erin.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erin. I appreciate that.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So next is an action item to approve the sabbatical leave process, which we had started earlier.
So
Thank you, Mike. Second. Thank you, Meredith. Any discussion?
I had a question.
Uh-huh.
Sorry, I looked at this yesterday, so I gotta kind of remember my exact question.
Okay.
So there's, on the first page, there's some red font.
Yep, those were just our reminders when we were discussing it.
Okay, so those will be removed, just because.
This is, yeah, that's just a copy of the article. So you don't have to do anything with that. That was just reminder for us what the article is.
Okay,
So you don't have to do anything with that.
thank you.
You're welcome. I will delete that before it is sent out.
Right, so the thing we're
Yes.
approving starts at application.
Correct.
Got it. Yeah,
Yes.
okay, that's what I.
I'm good.
I think this is great.
Okay.
Good work, PNG.
Did it?
Makes
Yeah,
Okay.
no, sorry, because it was the cog. Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Much clearer than it was.
Agreed.
And it gives us the time that we need for budget.
Okay.
Might be coming up.
Beautiful. Okay, all those in favor of approving the sabbatical leave process, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Herb wasn't here to vote. So we're gonna have to count that as an abstention. Next is an action item to authorize policy and governance committee to work with Up for Learning to revise the ends policy. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Kathy first. Second. Okay, Kelly second.
I asked a question.
You may now discuss.
Oh, sorry. I know UP also wants to do some work with the community engagement committees. Do they also need to be authorized? Like, do we need to also be authorized, or can we just do it? Like, there's the authorized policy and government to
Yeah.
work with the,
So ours is gonna be pretty specific. I don't know if I know what yours is for community engagement.
like, co-sponsoring a couple of events, and just because it
Okay.
says specifically authorized policy and governance.
Yeah.
I like don't want to do the wrong thing.
Do you have a timeline as to when that would start?
Yes, winter and spring.
So could we vote on it in November?
Yeah, let's.
Okay,
great,
cool.
great, cool.
Any other
And
thoughts?
I think it's related to updating the ends policy. It's in support of their work with policy governance.
Okay.
Right, Meredith, right? I
Yep.
think.
It is.
Any other thoughts?
How many are on PMG right now?
That's a lot of work.
That's why we want their help.
There's three of us. Sarah, myself, and Justin. And you all will be asked to do some stuff, so. Might be us.
We already have.
Go team go.
I get longer, I'm on a learning curve, so I really have to step up. So we could use more members.
Not till next year.
Okay,
All right.
it's all right.
All in favor of authorizing policy and governance committee to work with UP for the revision of the ends policy, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. The next is an action item to set the budget target for fiscal year 27, and there's some updated information in there about the healthcare premium increase, which was sort of just released.
Not official
Yesterday?
yet, that's
Yeah.
that's
Like-
what's moving forward and
Yeah.
likely to be true, but not official yet.
Right.
But it's the figure we'll be using pretty much until you adopt the budget, because I don't think we expect it to be sometime in, is it January maybe that it gets finalized, so.
I think it's a little later than that, but, they probably had discussions, with the regulator, and so they have a pretty good idea what's gonna be acceptable.
Awesome. Do we wanna share the presentation?
Yeah, it's the same presentation, with the sort of best case, worst case, and then the conservative middle, with the only change in information being that, the 11.9% increase that we had been using is now in 7.4, I think it was.
Three.
Three, so whatever delta you see is specifically attributable to that change.
Let's make a motion before you discuss. We didn't make a motion yet to accept all budget target.
Thank you.
So moved.
Meredith first,
Second.
Melissa second. Thank you, Vicky.
Patrick, are the percentages updated as well? So like where it says worst case tax impact in slide 6 of 11, 14 to 25% tax rate increase.
There.
Okay, thank you.
Are we talking about the presentation now?
Yeah.
And the assumption?
Yes.
Okay, so, yeah, different, health insurance premium would roughly have a better idea. This is characterized as conservative middle, not a worst case. And I'm curious as to why you have an assumption that there will be no relief, from the legislature on similar to last year.
On what in your,
Yeah, so last year, the legislature has granted a whole bunch of money to schools to buy down property taxes. And your assumption here is that not only that they won't do that to the same extent, but they will do nothing. And I'm just wondering why you referred that, why that should be characterized as a worst case. I mean, it sounds like worst case to me. And I know it's difficult to figure out, I mean, we're not gonna know what they're gonna do until well after we've set a budget and well after we've voted on it and everything. But I'm just wondering the characterization of that as a sort of a middle assumption, not a worst case assumption.
Well, I think you're identifying a single factor on the best case, worst case scale.
Correct, it's one of the assumptions.
What I'm talking about is collectively, these assumptions are presented in a best case, worst case, conservative middle. Part of what makes this entire conservative middle conservative is that assumption that there's no money. I've heard no speak of any money being used in that one-time way to buy down the tax rate again, so I don't have any reason.
Yeah, I hear you, and it's impossible to predict, I understand. You probably would not hear anything like that until well into the session. I'm just curious as to why you are assuming that there will be nothing when we're in the circumstances where we really don't know.
Well, again, so you have three examples here. In some scenarios, we assume almost all of that money is there again. And in other scenarios, there's none of it. So there is a variety of.
There is.
You can play any one of these assumptions on the up and down
Sure.
game, and it'll change the outcome.
Can I ask, sorry, can I ask a question, just really quick? Looking at the best case, it looks like the estimated tax increase is 2% to just under 12%. That's with $90 million in one-time funds. Can you just remind me on, if we're looking at the best case scenario, which towns will have which percent increase?
I'd have to look to Floyd
never
for
mind, don't worry about
that. I
it.
remember Starksboro being the most impacted town when we did this initially. I don't know if that's changed.
Has not changed. The story doesn't change, the amounts do a little, give me a second, I'll bring it up.
Pardon me, can you put up on the screen the documents you're looking at? Not everyone here has a way to look at them online.
I think to your point though, Herb, about why we do that assumption work is to give us the best chance at creating a target that would allow for any one of these things to be true. Last year we played with tax impact, which was a different way for us to look at setting a budget target. Which we hadn't previously done, largely because there was like at this point in time, or actually we started a little bit earlier last year. There was no talk about any one-time funds either, or
Sure.
funds, right? And so it just helps us sort of frame out what ifs about how to approach building a budget with all the what ifs that are out there.
I totally hear you. I totally understand. I mean, how the heck are we supposed to build a budget when they don't give us the
Right.
The numbers.
Do it.
Right.
Mhm.
So it's just a question.
Suggestions you can bring to the legislature, how you can.
Yeah, it's a big issue, it's been aggravating districts for many years. And anyway, I really hope.
We should.
Nothing else
We should
happens,
check.
if nothing else happens, that there be just some darn certainty so that people can build their budgets. But I'm one of a lot of people.
Maybe can I follow up real quick?
What's that?
Can I follow up real quick just on
Sure.
that question? Can you remind us again when they typically will give a yield estimate?
Mhm.
That we might be able to use in this budget process, even if it's an estimate?
You're gonna see various iterations of it, right? So first it'll be taken up in the House. And so that's probably sometime, sort of late February, you'll see their idea about what that might be, right? Well, first, going back a little bit, I think the administration is probably gonna issue something before the end of the year, but that's a guess.
Sure.
Yeah. Yes.
And then the House will, give their take on it, go to the Senate, they'll do something. That's why I'm talking about, you really don't know for sure until the session ends.
Yeah, and I guess the reason why I ask is that I think this is a really hard position today, even though we have to do something. In that it feels like so much of the tax impact that's projected across these scenarios is driven by the denominator, not the numerator, not how much we spend, but what the yield is gonna be. Right, even between the best and the worst case scenarios in total projected budget here, again, we're talking, I think it was $400,000 to $700,000 of spending. Sure. That we have control over. And yet within that small bit, the change in tax rate could be 2% to 25%, right? So much driven by those bottom line factors, number of pupils or weighted pupils, the yield itself. And so I think one of the challenges that we're gonna have to try to do tonight, if we're gonna give a target, which is our plan, is to really try to figure out like, how do you give a target when you don't actually know the factor that drives the thing that's you're worried about the most?
Yeah.
So I think to clarify Herb's position, the final yield comes out. But on December 1st, the commissioner of the Department of Taxes gives us their first pass on the yield based on projected income numbers, projected property values. So we have a number to work with on December 1st. And that will hold true, so that we should, like, it's statutorily required
Yes, it is.
for the December 1 yield letter for us to be able to build something from. But then it gets tweaked beyond that by the legislature, so we will have a number December 1st.
We will have another December 1st. Generally, in my experience is that.
We will have a
the governor
wrong number
will
December
give-
1st.
What's that?
We will have a wrong number on December.
Yeah, I mean, that was my point. The governor generally doesn't assume that the legislature will do anything one way or another. You know, so they're just calculating something in the tax department, which doesn't really get at this particular issue. I don't want to belabor the thing. I just didn't, I would categorize that as a worst case assumption, that nothing would be done. That's all. I have some other questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out the calculation and we're trying to work out a budget target. And I know in earlier iterations of this presentation, you talked about zeroing in, I think, somehow I remember 67% tax, average tax increase kind of thing. Am I right? Yeah, in other words.
Is 67?
Yeah, I remember because you came up with a number that you needed to save in order to result in a particular tax.
Oh, was it the 3 million from, is that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I don't see that here. So just in my mind, in trying to figure out a budget target or thinking about a budget target, it'd be helpful to me to know if we saved X amount of money. If we wanted to think about a 6 to 7% tax increase, and I would say as an option B, you know, if we wanted to think of an 8 or 9% tax increase, how much would we need to save? Because that I think goes into what we're trying to do, which is figuring out a budget target.
That's in the presentation for each of the scenarios. So, and these have been updated with the new health insurance premium rate increase. So if we're looking at the best case scenario to achieve a 0% tax rate increase in the most impacted town, which is Starksboro, we believe, we would need to save $3.85 million. And every 1% tax rate change is about $275,000. So you could figure out whatever tax rate you think will be acceptable and kind of do the math on that to get you in the ballpark.
Yeah, help me with the math though. And where are you reading from?
Well, I think I'd appreciate it if we could just go budget, you know.
There's a
grade by
tax
grade.
impact slide. After each option, there's a tax impact slider. So it's like conservative middle says mitigating tax impact.
Oh, okay, so like, worst case mitigating, yeah.
So
I feel like
there's
you're
a slide, and so then the 1% tax rate change for the conservative middle, for example, would be 265,000.
Patrick, if you don't mind taking us through this, that would be great.
Yeah, I don't mind. Yeah, I was, yep. Simply trying to spare you because you've seen this presentation probably 5 times now, but we can walk through it again with a slight change of the. So the first time this was presented was in June at the Finance and Facilities. Nothing has changed since June, except 11.9% insurance premium is now 7.3% insurance. And what I would say, so that is the conservative middle. So in June, it was just the one. There was a request to do a best case, worst case. So we've added best case, worst case and kept that kind of conservative middle that we started working from in June. And I'm not wedded to any one of the assumptions. The reality is when we're building budgets, before we get information, we have to make assumptions about all these different things to build the budget. So that we start with the best case scenario. And in this best case scenario, our total projected spending is just over 36.5 million, which is about a $1.7 million increase from our current spending, which is about a 5% increase.
Current spending or not?
Current budget, sorry, thank you. And the assumptions that we're using to build that are 7.3% on the healthcare premium. What we know about salary increases going from FY26 to FY27, those are known. Those are settled agreements for both support staff and professional staff next year. This assumes no change in revenue. This uses a 2% inflation factor. Some of the other scenarios you'll see use a higher inflation factor. This assumes a reduction of about 8.99 long-term weighted average daily membership. That's our student count effectively. So a decrease of about 9 student counts. And this assumes we keep all the same programming and personnel and just sort of roll that forward. The tax impact of that, we're estimating across the different towns would range between a 2% increase and an 11.89% increase if we made no change. So on about a $400,000 home, which is just under the median home value in Addison County, I think it's like 415 or something like that, is the median home value in Addison County. What that equates to is a range of about $103 to $627 a year per a $400,000 home for those who pay based on their home's value and not based on income sensitized amounts, which about 2/3 of our community pays based on the income sensitized calculation. And that's pretty individualized based on their level of income. So what we have historically done and we'll do in the first iteration of the budget that you'll see in November is we'll give you sort of the updated median income. And then we'll show you what the tax impact would be based on that median income. So the assumptions behind the tax impact, this assumes that $90 million are used to fill that $118 million hole that's created by the one-time funds used in building FY26. And we believe that doing that would decrease the yield due to that gap in one-time funds. And you can see the yield assumptions that we're making there. And you can see what that decreased yield would be from 8,596 to 8,397. And again, this uses flat common levels of appraisal, except New Haven, which we know is complete, either has completed or will have completed in time for this to be.
It will have. New Haven will reappraise for this fiscal tax year. Bristol will be the following year.
So that's the sort of best case scenario. I put all these in quotes because it could always be better, it can always be worse. So there's so little information now, it's hard to be super confident in anything. And so when we look at that best case mitigating that tax impact, if that felt like too high of an expectation for taxpayers, if we were to set a 0% tax rate increase in the most impacted towns, so again, that's on the highest end of that range that I've been giving you. And the reason we chose 0% is because that was the last target this board set for a budget was 0%. So that's not pulling anything out of thin air. That's the last one we had. If you were to work for that goal again, according to this best case scenario, we'd have to reduce spending by $3.8 million. And give or take, 1% tax rate change is about $275,000 in spending. So if you're okay with a 1% tax rate increase in the most impacted town, then that 3.8 million can be reduced by about 275,000. Call it 3.5 million now. So you could sort of dial that up or down to whatever number you think is acceptable to the community. And just to put that into context, since the bulk of the budget is staffing, when we look at professional staff and support staff, you can kind of get a sense of how many positions would a 1% tax rate change equate to if all of the savings came from positions? And it's between 2 and 3 positions per 1% change to the tax rate. And that effectively holds true in all of the scenarios, that it's, $275,000 to change the tax rate by 1%. And we're looking at basically 2 to 3 positions per 1% change on the tax rate. Looking at FY 27 average total compensation. So moving to the worst case, we have best case. Now, worst case, total projected spending is up 7% or almost 2.5 million. And we have historically seen in years when we make no change to programming or personnel and roll everything forward, right around 6% is kind of what we typically have seen over the last 10 years or so. It hasn't been often that we've realized that, but the 7% is not far off from what we have seen in prior years. So again, we have the healthcare premium at 7.3, and we know the negotiated salary increases, so we've accounted for those. This does assume a decrease in revenue based on the students that are tuitioning in from Lincoln School District. So again, we have to make some assumptions about how many students do we anticipate tuitioning in from Lincoln. At give or take $20,000 a student, a few students moving one way or the other can add up to some real dollars. This assumes a couple of students don't come and decreases our revenue a little bit. This uses a 4% inflation factor instead of 2% and sees a much steeper reduction in our long-term weighted average daily membership, but still maintains programs and personnel. So that the tax impact for this is more in the range of 14 to 25%. And we're looking at about $1,100 to $1,600 on a $400,000 home, again, for the approximate 1/3 of our community that pays based on the value of their home. This assumes $0 in those one-time funds are used to fill the $118 million hole that was created to address FY 26. And we would expect to see a decreased yield pretty significantly as a result of that $118 million gap in those one-time funds. And this actually assumes a decrease in the common levels of appraisal, which is CLAs have been pretty wild in recent years. They've fluctuated up and down and all over the place. Generally speaking, conceptually, you have a reappraisal, it comes in at something close to 100%, which is what's supposed to happen. Over time, that 100% decreases because property values in real life increase, but what your town has them listed for stays at that assessed value. And so your property's real value, assessed value, is a smaller and smaller percentage of its actual value. So those common levels of appraisal tend to decrease over time by design. So this assumes a 3% decrease, whereas the prior examples kept those CLAs flat.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I think you've said this before, Patrick, but when you have a range of tax rate increases, so for example, this 14 to 25, what's the variable that results in that range?
So all of these assumptions we're talking about. So these assumptions on this page are specific to the tax impact. So the first page, the assumptions are specific to the spending.
Right.
And this page, the assumptions are specific to the tax impact. So the variables are how much one-time funds are going to get used. That's going to adjust the yield. And then what happens with CLAs.
So like one town herb, I think might be 14%, whereas another town might be up to 25%.
Right.
That way you're asking.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. So this is a
Different
different
CLAs.
CLA.
That's pretty specifically different CLAs.
Yeah.
So one town might be a little lower.
That's kind of what I assumed, but I
I
didn't
think you
quite.
have to add into that very clearly where the town sits in its appraisals relative to a 100%
Sure,
CLA.
sure.
So as that goes up or down, if you're significantly current
Right.
in your appraisal, your percentage increase won't be as high,
Correct.
but the dollar amount will be. Should be given all equal
Yeah.
increases. The goal of the state is to have the dollar amount be relatively the same.
You know, just a comment, I think you were saying that the highest impact there was in Starksboro, who just completed their reappraisal 2 years ago.
Last year.
Yeah, so
Been at 111% is the last I looked. It was 111%. And Bristol's was in 65.
but you're saying that Starksboro, even with that recent reappraisal, is gonna suffer the most in terms of a CLA impact?
That's the calculation. I mean, we can pull up the figures behind.
No,
it.
no, I just.
The
you know,
percentage of the tax increase, so
Yeah.
let's say your penny tax
Right,
is $1,
sure,
right? And in Bristol, it's $1.70. So
Right.
Starksboro versus Bristol, you're gonna see a 25% increase in Starksboro to show the same relative increase in taxable dollars as a 14% increase in Moncton, 25 in Starksboro, 14 in Moncton as a percentage of the tax rate.
yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. It's just remarkable that towns are doing their best to reappraise and it's not helping them.
Well, because we're talking about a year over year tax rate change. It's the change in that time of the CLA matters more. So if Starksboro if they're at 111% last time and they're gonna
Yeah.
drop to 108%. That 3% decrease in your CLA is gonna impact your tax rate change, even though your CLA, it could still be the highest CLA in the four towns.
It's actually.
It's just,
But your rate change
it's
could be an increase.
the adage, no good deed goes unpunished, right? Yeah, I got it.
Yes, we forgot that factor.
The goal of the CLA, in conjunction with a statewide adjustment, is to try and level that playing field.
I totally understand. It just has bizarre consequences.
Resident finance novice question here. Probably the least knowledgeable of finances here, so sorry if this is a dumb question. What is a reasonable target for FY 27?
Tax target?
Yeah, or increase, like I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You know.
What is that?
No.
No, but I think
It's
it's.
the
that-
target.
There's no right or wrong answer on that.
It's the question, you're looking at how well we like things that history.
And I think too, keeping in mind that. There's a ton of flexibility. Right now. Because this is a target. Usually what occurs is that target is. Extrapolated on, right, and we find out where the linchpins are and move stuff around. And whatever else we decide tonight in terms of where we're headed in a direction could impact. What's flexible in that budget target and what's not. So. I think right now this is like. Our best guess, and that's flexible.
One of the challenges of where we are right now is. In many ways, and Mike has brought this point up multiple times, in many ways, the tax rate. Has factors that are outside of this board's control. However. When voters go to vote yes or no, what they're thinking about is how's this gonna impact. My personal finances, and so the tax rate is the most important thing that drives. The hit in the wallet. The board's perspective in control is over spending, which is relative to the tax rate, but only one of the factors in driving that tax rate. So it's challenging to think about which target do you set? Do you set a tax rate target knowing you have only some control over that? Or do you set a spending target where there's much more control over that? the most recent years, this board has really wanted to think about it from a tax rate perspective, because that felt critically important given our context.
Yeah.
Historically speaking, for many, many years, the budget target set by a board would be year-over-year spending. And for a long time, it was, if you're at 3% or less than last year's spending, then we feel like that's gonna get support. But it's just a very different context now, so.
Good opportunity to remind, for the last 8 years, we're at 1.51 annual year-over-year spending increase.
What was it?
1.51%.
And that has a couple of years where there was a spending decrease that brought that average down.
It's pretty impressive.
Significant.
So in terms of the worst case scenario, mitigating tax impact, to hit that 0% target would mean reducing spending by about 6.3 million. And again, a 1% tax rate change is about 275,000. All those same sort of assumptions from the prior slide in terms of how that equates to positions. Then shifting to the conservative middle. So this is the presentation that was given in June, with the only change being the healthcare premium increase. And so this conservative middle budget forecast, and what I mean when I say conservative middle is we have the best case, we have the worst case, and then there's something that's right in the middle of those. We're on the worst case side of middle in this conservative middle assumption. So in this case, that spending would go up about 2 million, or about 6% from current budget. Again, we know the negotiated salary increases, we know what is presumed to be the healthcare premium increase. This also keeps revenue flat and uses 4% inflation. So that's, again, the assumptions on the spending side. On the tax impact side, the estimated tax range, tax increase range here is a little under 10 to a little over 20%. And a little under 600 to a little more than 1,250 on a $400,000 home.
So Patrick, you've got that range again, you know, a range, 9 point something, 20 point something. Yeah, how would you figure out what the average is? You just add them all up and divide, or is it a little more complicated because of the, you know, different town circumstances?
We haven't averaged those before, so I'd have to think about what would be the best way to approach that.
I don't know if it makes sense with only 4 towns and it being on 9 and 20, that's a big difference. I don't know that it makes
Right.
sense to average it.
What was the,
No, just in terms of
I think it's
the
important to
district.
note that a 20% increase on a tax rate that's significantly lower because of reappraisal, and a 9% increase on a tax rate that's significantly higher could relatively be the same tax rate dollar increase.
The dollar amount.
Right.
Correct.
For the percentage.
And
That's kind of what I'm getting at, cause if, I mean, 20.25% is huge,
the
right?
shock value?
Yeah, but,
and
I'm just wondering if there's some other way to look at it that might be more realistic of. You know, how much an ordinary taxpayer is gonna be paying more. Under a certain, you know, budget than they were the previous year. I'm just trying to figure out.
It
right
seems like,
there with you, and
seems like
that's
this might
the
be
constant battle, is where do we come up with a number
Right,
that is, the folks in this room have a significantly better understanding of how this number works than the person who's showing up and seeing these numbers for the first time, right? And how do we be transparent, clear,
correct.
and accurate in a way that allows our community to make the best choice for them, knowing full well that transparency and lack of understanding is fraught with peril.
I totally understand, but I remember the way things have been presented sometimes in the past is a combination of those different ways of looking at that. It includes a tax rate, but it also includes, if I remember from the charts, you know, this is how much more you're gonna pay on your house that's worth X. And versus last year, and that would come down to a percentage too.
And we would definitely, so just to be clear, in the first draft budget that we give you based on the target you set, you will get all of that like we have presented in the
I'm
past.
sure.
Everything we've been showing to date has been sort of a high level kind of, here's the environment we are working within.
I totally get it. It's just that, you know, if we're in the process of trying to set a budget target and, you know, I'm sure that 20% number probably that's it's just a different way of looking.
I will offer this, and not to add any more mud to the stream. We do have, Patrick and I have worked through numbers that say, what's the dollar increase per $100,000 of assessed value?
Yeah.
Right, so in those towns where you're assessed at 800,000 and the same house is assessed at 400,000, you've got a 2x number in there.
I know.
And it works out fairly, but this early in the conversation, it's about what's the driver the board is looking for Patrick to you know, give to me to start working on.
Yeah, I get it.
And Patrick, am I right in that we have to change the ballot language in terms of thinking about what voters will actually see? The numbers that we have to report now
Yes.
are per pupil spending and the percentage change in per pupil spending, rather than a change in tax.
So spending per pupil and the change in per pupil, yes, and overall spending and change in overall spending.
Okay.
But the tax rate change, I don't think is on the ballot. It's been a little different each of the last few years, so I'd have to go back and see. So where did it actually land on for FY for this coming budget? But I believe it's those two pieces.
So that might be useful to keep in mind, like, we can think about lots of ways to present the data, and that makes sense. And we're required to present the data in a particular way.
Yeah.
When people are voting, and that includes per pupil spending, which we have control over, and that number relative to last year in the total budget. Yeah.
What do you and the Finance and Facilities Committee think is a reasonable number?
Yeah.
I wonder if I could buy Mike some time with that and finish these last couple of slides and then we can dive right in, because that's the question.
That's all I need.
They'll have the,
So key assumptions here, declining pupil count of 38.77. Again, decreased yield due to the $118 million. Flat CLAs except for New Haven. And also just sort of acknowledging no spending threshold penalties. That's still a thing. There are communities that are up against a spending threshold. And it's a spending per pupil threshold, and if you exceed that, there is a dollar for dollar tax penalty. We don't anticipate in any of these scenarios that we'll be up against that yet. So I want to just acknowledge that. And so in this conservative middle mitigating tax impact scenario, to get a 0% tax rate increase, we would need to reduce spending by about 5.6 million. Again, 1% tax rate change, about 265, which equates to about 2 or 3 positions. And as Floyd said, like we have not been turning a blind eye to the fiscal reality that we've been facing. Over the last, from FY 18 to FY 26, we've reduced 43 positions, almost entirely through attrition. And we've averaged an annual budget increase of about 1.5%. So we have been working at this really hard, and we are still facing challenges. There. Is that enough time, Mike?
Totally.
so if the cost of living increases or adjustments going to be 2.8% in 2026. What are we seeing as far as increased costs already as a result of tariffs and whatnot? And is it reasonable to project that between 2.8 and 3% increase of cost of living adjustment for 27? Are we seeing increases already in costs other than insurance, which we don't have any control
And our biggest driver is staff, and that's contractually set now. And that's running 6.
So we have transportation contracts for next year. We know what that's going to be, which is a big driver. We have, especially now with the healthcare premiums, we know what the personnel costs. The personnel will change and that will change the cost, but relatively speaking, we know what personnel costs will be because things are effectively settled. So the vast majority of the budget, we have pretty good information to lean on from a spending perspective. We talked before, special education can be quite a variable because of, in particular with the greatest needs and the really high costs associated with those. But that's mostly mitigated by what we anticipate for revenue that goes hand in hand with what we anticipate for expenses. So even that is mostly mitigated at the end. So when we're talking about is it 2%, 3%, 4% inflation, it's on many, many lines, but collectively the total dollars is relatively small compared to all those other really big parts of the budget.
And I'll add to your specific part of the question on tariffs, et cetera. Most of those are gonna affect capital spending. We're buying something or fixing something. So that's a known number in our budget. It just means we do less if the number's higher, or a little bit more if the number's lower.
And what's the capital reserve right now?
The total capital reserve is. I haven't break it.
It's in below.
This depends which one, the capital. The capital reserves for.
Where were you at it?
I just looked at the financial packet for the month, but I might have grabbed the wrong number, so I want to validate.
You're right on the right one.
Okay.
So our reserves for fund balance. Ed reserve is 719, capital fund reserve is 1.5 million. We have an uncommitted fund balance of 750,000, which will be. Probably part of the conversation going forward as we're looking to mitigate. Either tax or capital spending. Depending on what the board wants to do to drive that, how best to utilize that.
Thank you, Phil.
I do have genuine thoughts. I don't know what you all think about that. But I'll jump first. I'm having a hard time thinking about this in the same way that we have in the past with setting a tax percentage. Given the wide range of assumptions that we don't have, and knowing that at least there'll be some form of closer to knowing with this December 1st yield. And that coupled with the idea that we as a board seem to, and I don't really want to speak on behalf of the board, so if I'm misinterpreting wrong, but seem to be moving forward to a budget this year where we're going to try to buy another year. Right, we're going to try to not necessarily implement the big changes that we've been discussing, but rather figure out how do we have time to then implement changes in a future budget. I could be wrong, but that's generally the sentiment that I seem to be feeling. And with those two things in mind, I wonder if it might be useful this year to ask Patrick for a range of cost reduction scenarios. What would it look like to spend $500,000 less than your projected budget, or $1 million, or $2 million? And again, if this is if this is not a useful exercise for yours, I'd be open to changing that. But the idea there is that would give us a sense of what would the one-time or immediate expenditure changes have to be to produce a range of reductions in our spending, the one thing that we have control over. Then individually, we could say, oh, if I applied that to the best case scenario, this would be the tax rate, or the worst case, this would be the tax rate. We could play that game, but we could also wait until 1 month from now when we at least had a sense of, here's what that $500,000 reduction would do with this estimated deal. Here's what $1 million would do. I don't know if we can go much more than, that, but if I look at our increase in spending, the best case to worst case is 1.7 to $2.5 million. I don't think we'd have to cut any more than that. I don't think we maybe even get to that point, but that might give me enough information to see what would the consequences for education be, while having at least some sense of what that would do to the tax rate, given the huge uncertainty about the bottom line. But I could be wrong about this.
Sorry. both at the same time. So I hear what you're saying. I like that approach. I also would like to do it based on spending, not budget to budget. Like ultimately, we want to look budget to budget and do that analysis, but some quick math I was doodling on my MAUSD provided notepad here is that, and again, I know that this is only financials through September, so I recognize that that remaining 2.4 will likely change, over the next number of months. But if I look budget to projected, we're gonna come in under this year in budget, right? Pretending we're further along by 2.4 million. Nobody in the town assumes that's gonna stay that way. It's not going to stay that way. But my point is, I don't wanna say the budget for this year to the budget to next year is gonna increase by some of the numbers you just quoted from the slides. And that's gonna be this tax percentage, when really that's gonna be more than we need because we're spending at a lower rate right now. Maybe there is still need, but do you see what I'm saying? Like starting from where we currently are versus where we thought we would be.
It starts to get complicated with need, because some of what is generating that fund balance are positions we need and can't fill. And so it's,
Yep.
you know, that conversation, and that's been an annual conversation. Either positions that have historically been filled, but we find attrition and we take advantage of it, or we have had times where, you know what, we've tried to fill this position for 3 years and haven't. Maybe it's time to just let that go from the budget, and that can be realized as savings. So how that equates to need, just because we're not spending it doesn't necessarily mean we don't need it. It's just that we can't get it.
Agreed. I'm just thinking what you budget versus what you actually incur.
Mhm.
It's always different. You're budgeting so far in advance. Starting from that place. And I know you do that ultimately as we get further down the road. I know you go line item by line item and work through it, but just looking at the numbers year over year. I'm also not opposed, and just throw it out there to your point of like kind of buying time for a year or two as we try and figure out what our direction is. Given, again, preliminary projections where our reserves and stuff are gonna be, I think that is gonna be something this board has to consider depending on where the percentages come in. By tax, recognizing it's a one-time Band-Aid, it's not a perpetual fix.
And that was my question to Mike's proposal, was what role does the use of one-time funds play in creating those scenarios? My only concern in, you know, if we did a 500,000 and a million and a 2 million scenario. It's hard to build those budgets in a level of detail that we do and present that information to you in a way that is not identifiable to actually human beings. And so when we create a $500,000 savings scenario that impacts probably relatively few people, great. And if we prepare 2 million, like I guess I would just be hesitant to prepare something that seems highly unlikely we would ever go for, because it's going to put human beings through the ringer by building that budget. So just be really thoughtful about what's the largest savings you would look for me to bring to you. And know that our practice has been, before anybody sees that their job is going to be impacted at a board meeting, we're going to have a conversation with them first. And when we have that conversation, for some people, every single year for the last several years, it has a toll on them personally and on the teaching. So just keep that in mind as we're playing out how many scenarios we're going to be playing through.
I fully agree, and I'll just say, you know, again, I'm not wed to any of the actual range. I think the challenge I see is when you get to your worst case scenario. With essentially a mitigation that says to get it to 0%, you have to reduce by 6.3 million. That means to get your highest tax rate down in that town, in the worst case scenario, you're spending 3 million. Like, there's pretty big numbers if that's the scenario that plays out. And so I think we can hopefully as a board and as administration walk the line between modeling out unrealistic, but maybe scenarios that we have to have in our back pocket if the worst case comes to fruition with taxes, while also giving us a range of options and hopefully where we think we'll be in reality. I don't know if that trail.
It's almost how it's almost always played out, right? We sort of built for this, like, oh, actually it's better, and now we don't have to issue any risks.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple of things, you know, I totally appreciate what you're saying, Patrick, about, I mean, it's gotta be so anxiety producing to watch a board trying to build a budget and knowing. I mean, the information is already out there in your presentation, right? So cause you say, you know, if you wanna reduce spending by X amount of money, this is what the impact is gonna be on positions. So if we then get to a point where we say, okay, this is the budget, it's like, well, people are gonna, they can use that to try to figure out that there's gonna be an impact on them, right? I don't know how to avoid that, Patrick, you know, once we get it up into the bigger numbers. That was just one comment, I just don't know. I like what you're talking about, Mike. In terms of some ranges, and I know it might be difficult, but I think
That's no problem.
it might be problematic. I didn't mean difficult. But I think that's kind of the right approach. I would just add to that, and I think you probably would do this, that with each of those reduction targets, you have associated with what we were talking about before of, well, what's that actually gonna do to the taxes as opposed to the tax rate? I mean, I grant, you know, you're gonna want the tax rate, but I think it's gonna be important to see what the actual impact is in terms of an actual increase in taxes. So I like Mike's approach.
Also, just me, I'm sort of in favor of starting fat. If that makes sense, budget wise, and trying to stay fat on purpose as we're navigating where we're going to next. And then I'm noodling about how do we be creative? How are we delivering education? What does that look like? What does the space look like that happens in? And I almost wonder if we approach this budget cycle in some manner that we're already talking about, and then wonder about how do we build an education program we want to see if we start at $0?
Zero-based budgeting.
Zero-based budgeting. I know it's a pain in the tush. I don't wanna do it, but I wonder about that only because we keep saying like, how are we gonna deliver education differently? This budget process isn't different. It's very much like, what are we carrying through forward? Changing nothing. And it isn't about eliminating stuff as much as it is, how do we build and have some equity in that build so that our students are being offered things that make good sense and move us toward where we want to be. So it doesn't have to happen for this time because that's a huge lift, but something to throw out there in terms of like, not only are we going to set this target, but we have to know which way we're going. And if all we know is like, yep, we'd like option 8.1, right? If that's all we know, fine, but what does that actually look like? And how do we break that down so that we're actually doing that in a way that makes good sense? So just to start thinking about like, take this year, yes, and set a target, but really like think a little bit further out. Like, what's the impact next time? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I like that idea. And I think it will probably dovetail into our conversation later tonight about the educational delivery models and things like that. But I could imagine when that gets down to a range of a small enough number of scenarios that we're still considering, that might be feasible to actually make a full budgets, what it would look like under this scenario and this speak directly to your point, like well in advance of what this discussion would be for the following year's budget. Even at the scenario level, we could start to see what that restructuring could look like, at least sort of internally, to help us decide what would the impact of those be. Oh, so I like the way that could energize us.
Yeah.
And what more, or not what more, but how much wiser can we use the dollars that we've got to increase these outcomes? Because we're spending more and more and more and not seeing the outcomes. So have teachers tell us, what do they need? What would be the best expenditure of our dollars to get a better outcome? And apply it that way.
I think that all gets baked in when we start to really dig into what scenario we're working on, yeah. But just to like put that in your brain of think about what setting this target actually means. Because if we go too thin, and then how do we build? Yeah.
Well, and I think to your point, Pat, I think it's really important to me, I'll speak on my personal opinion, that we don't create that, as it is to you, I know that unease with our staff. And have to have conversations that ultimately don't pan out to the fact that they're position that's eliminated or something. I think it's really important that we avoid those at all costs. So I agree with you on making a fact, if that's the terminology we're gonna use tonight, in a way to preserve and not create that unrest, at least initially. Like, it's too early to create that unrest. We just have so many unknown variables. And I don't want people carrying that they can't do their jobs well if they're worried about that. Yes.
And that's always been the challenge in the budget building cycle. There are many variables until 6 weeks before you have to adopt it.
Yeah.
Like, we're building based on a lot of assumptions, and we think this and we think that, and we have seen in recent years, like, we've been working on it for months, and then maybe 3 weeks before you have to adopt it, there's a complete 180, and it's all like, it just throws all of that out the window, and now this is your reality, and we scramble and try to put something together that's reasonable. And that complicates multi-year planning too. Like, when you don't know until 6 weeks before you have to adopt next year's budget, the idea of 2 or 3 years from now. How do you even begin to comprehend what 2 or 3 years from now is gonna be?
I think preserving what we can though. Was
Right.
my point.
Yeah.
Patrick, would there be another way we could set the upper bound? And instead of setting a dollar value for you, set a aspirational goal? What's the least spending we could produce with minimal staffing changes? Is that a directive that would be helpful? I don't want to overstep our bounds in terms of telling you how you have to craft the budget, so I'm reticent on some level to make that suggestion. But on the other suggestion, that would give you some flexibility to come forth with a budget that says, I'm not setting off alarm bells unnecessarily, but I am letting you as a board know, like, this is pretty much where we can get to without having to set off those alarm bells, because there just isn't another way that you see reducing that. So I don't know if that's useful for you.
Well, where my mind goes with that, like, we have established some staffing rules ourselves. We have education quality standards, staffing levels. Those are all the sort of staffing rules, sort of big, like, broad terminology that we've used to build out all of these models for the scenario. So if your charge to me was like, reduce spending, part of which is going to include staffing, to as low as you can without sending off alarm bells, to me, it's adhering closely to those staffing rules that we've established. Like we've said, this is the staffing we need to deliver the education that we want to deliver for students in a variety of ways. So I wouldn't be making something up that's different from that. I would be doing what I could to bring us as close to that as we can. The alarm bells conversation, right? So one approach to doing that is take advantage of attrition whenever it presents itself to get as close as we can to that through attrition. That's basically what we've been doing. Hard to know exactly what that's going to yield. Another approach is hit that target through attrition and rifts if needed. That's going to set off alarm bells for some people. Even though it's within the staffing roles that have been identified. So
you would need more guidance from.
I need a little bit more
For sure.
yeah, on what approach to take.
I have an idea. My strength is not in understanding finances, but it is in moving conversations forward. So this is just an idea to throw something out there so we can have something to work off of. What if we said, since we want to start Pat, take the best case scenario assumptions, and right now it's looking like a 5% increase from FY 26. What if we say, take the best case scenario assumptions and an under 5% increase from FY 26, that'll give us the ability to start that, as Aaron says. And if Starksboro is our most impacted town and they have the most favorable CLA, the numbers kind of look reasonable to me. Maybe that's just an idea.
Well, and something else I will offer. This has become more apparent in the last couple of years as we've started building budgets earlier and earlier. When you got your first budget 2 years ago in August, that was unprecedentedly early. This year you got it in June, even earlier. At that point in time, even in this point in time tonight, we have not gone through line by line, 1,800 lines, and scrubbed all of those for the greatest efficiency possible. This was merely taking budget, rolling it forward with all the assumptions we told you, here's where that would land us. So your first draft budget for FY 27 will include that scrubbing, that initial scrub.
Right.
Which will change what you've seen. And see how close does that get us to feeling, to your point. So some of that may come in that deep scrubbing, some of that may come in finding those efficiencies and some savings, so that would feel reasonable.
Liz, did you want to add something?
Yeah, while I'm thinking about this conversation, I am wondering if we are assuming, I just feel like it ties in a lot with our options conversation and whether or not we'd be waiting whether, say, change was approved in March of some sort structurally to our district. That the assumption with how we're moving forward with this budget is how it impacts essentially the A1, which was status quo with following the staffing rules, is what I'm hearing. That this is what, so, because this isn't including the idea of setting a target, because it feels like we can't, right? Set a target for a change that would occur fall of 26, right? Like we're building this and setting this target based on A1 for next year is what I'm hearing. Yeah. Or what are other people's thoughts on that, I guess? Or is there still that's what I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about setting the target. And I think that we do have to do this, right? This way.
I
don't
think
know.
just in general, I think in general, our default has been the A1, right? Like A1 is the option if no other options seem feasible. So I think you're right, that yes, we would be working with that.
Yeah, it isn't yet in the context of where we're going. We haven't identified where we're going yet. So this is effectively in a vacuum right now, not necessarily moving toward anything other than an FY 27 budget in A1 style.
Yeah, and my sense from last meeting was that we felt like we had to do that, and that we'd also do a disservice if we didn't in parallel move forward, thinking long term.
Yeah.
Right, that if we just end here and say, yep, we fix it for next year and stop our process. And then we're not gonna be in the same position as we are next year, where we might have some flexibility to keep the ship going. Because we might have used some one-time funds, conditions might change on the ground where things are expensive, so the idea was. My sense from the end of last meeting was to exactly proceed in this way.
Yeah.
Think about what we can do right now, while not ignoring the broader conversation of what the future looks like.
With that future potentially, because we don't know yet, because we haven't gotten to item F. It could be A1.
Oh.
And then that could influence, like we could make greater changes to the budget based on, okay, we're gonna pursue A1 long term.
Can I just offer some numbers for context? For us, the last 3 years, our ed spending number has increased, has changed. 24 was down 1.05, 25 was up 0.02. And 26 was down 0.1%. To give you context, the state was 5.35, 8.44, 12.01 in the ed spending numbers. So we can do what we've done these last 3 years to control our spending. But the state at the fiscal year 25 projection, and then I'm taking this out of the December 1 letter, so it's not necessarily where it ended, but that was the number they projected. At a 12.101% increase, or the year before 8.44 versus our 0.02. The rest of the state is going to impact whatever we do. Right? I mean, if you look at those numbers and it's That's what we've done as a community. Point two. Negative 0.1. Negative 1.05.
Yeah.
There's, and we still had significant tax increases. So when we talk about that, I just want to make sure that as a group, we recognize that context. And when we get to item F, as well as we've done as a board, as an admin, as teachers, as a community, we're running out of room. And the rest of the state is continuing to increase. And our voters have said, no, we won't accept that tax increase. I think that context is important to weigh in right now. Because when we talk about, let's go with a 5% increase, that's 5 times what we've done in any one of the last 3 years.
So, Floyd, in terms of, yeah, you're still talking about tax increase, if one.
Talking about ed spending,
What's that?
talking about ed spending. The spending number.
5% more.
Which is what's driving the yield, which is
Okay.
what's driving the tax rate.
Right. But I think you were also talking about tax increase.
Not once in that.
Okay, whatever. If I were wanting to look at the dollar amount increase in taxes for different towns, I suspect I could see that in past
Sure, it's
budgets.
easily accessible on the state website.
Well, it would also, I'm thinking at the local level, Floyd. I'm assuming that I could probably look at the past budgets and
Yes.
would show what the dollar amount increase in taxes
Yes.
historically has been.
Yeah, we have other presentations with that in it. Yep.
Yeah.
And then probably the best place to look is every annual meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
When that's because there are multiple iterations, that's the one that's going to taxpayers.
We actually
It
had
breaks it
a
up.
presentation that had like 10 or so years on it. We
Where,
had a scope of like 10 or so years with a
Right.
graph that laid out
okay,
the last 10 years of that.
when was that? Remember?
I can find it for you. Yeah.
Cause that's my framework.
Yeah.
Rather than the tax rate per se,
The dollars.
the dollar.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just go through the annual reports, it's all there, and you can find whatever you want to see.
But I think that maybe there's a presentation.
There's some.
Did you
I can
give?
picture a slide where I
It was
put,
like-
This slide is
just
the smoothest one.
it would have
Yeah.
been October, November, December, I think of last year.
Well, we can,
I'm
Dig it up.
fine.
yeah, we
I'm
can
not
dig it up.
asking anyone to do anything here.
I know. We'll dig it up though, because that
No,
doesn't exist. That was something we presented for that reason,
I'm not
right?
asking for any additional.
So the idea, I like your idea though, of like, what's the dollars at the end of the day? We gotta set some sort of target. We gotta have an idea of what we're shooting for.
Well, I like what Mike presented.
Okay.
I think you mentioned three different ranges, Mike? Or something like that,
Something like that.
and ask for, I guess, 3 different budgets, to be offered to us.
Mike, could you restate what those ideas were?
That's a genuine question. Can you?
Yes.
say those?
I don't think I have a solid set of like, these are the numbers that we should definitely ask for, but I think. My read on it was that what motivated that comment was just looking at the increase in our projected education spending. From a best case to worst case scenario ranging from something like 1.7 to 2.5 million. And then me saying, well, we're probably not gonna not spend $0 more. We tried that last year. Feels really hard to do that again. At least at the onset. I could be wrong. So I tried to walk back from there. So I think I said something like, what would it look like if we spent $500,000 more than last year, $1.5 million more, and 2 million, or maybe you can look at it the other way, right?
Yeah.
Like. Taking it from the worst case scenario, for example, like 500,000 less than that, or 1 million less than that, and 1.5 million or something along those lines. Again, I'm not so sure what that last number should be, given Patrick's and others' right concerns. So I don't know what people feel there. Especially I like your comment too, of like, if we're really stalling, like, we don't wanna cut something that a year from now, we're like, oh, actually, in whatever the new MASD is, like, we really should have had that. Also,
Other thoughts about what those ranges could look like? Melissa,
I'm okay with it.
your numbers, gal. No.
One of the, so again, as we do the scrubbing, I'm trying to think about how would a change in revenue play into what you just described. So when we're talking about spending, that doesn't account for any change in revenue. If we see a change in revenue to the good, how would you want me to account for that in what you just described? Another way we could do that is look at spending specifically, which is going to be the difference between total spending and revenue.
Yeah.
That allows for that interplay to be accounted for, and you could still say, we don't want to add spending to increase more than this, or this. Same concept, but just
I think it's a good adjustment.
Yeah, because we're not working it also.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right, I think we want to celebrate that and account for that.
Sure, for sure.
Yeah.
How many options do we have for revenue adjustment?
Well, I think Floyd talked before about the special education extraordinary reimbursement. Again, because there's sometimes big dollars, there's sometimes big revenue. I think we want to be able to account for that, and there's potential that there's a significant revenue shift there that we'd want to account for. And I just don't want that to get missed if we're looking at top line spending only.
Are there other grants that we have or that we're eligible for that would be a revenue source?
We do have lots of other grants, federal grants and things of that nature. Other grants are really small, like there are Terry Shattuck grants that, $1,500 or something that, isn't material in terms of the scope that we're talking about in a big budget, certainly material for impact in a classroom. Floyd loves, I think one of his pastimes is grant searching and.
You would recognize
because
that
that
most
some
grants,
things.
if you're chasing a new grant, it comes with a new program and an expenditure expectation.
Mhm.
Right? Think of ELP. We added ELP, and I think we're around 9% of the total ELP budget is coming out of the general fund. The rest of it is grant funded, and some pieces of it are funded by the families. But it created this whole additional program. So it wasn't, here's some money to solve your current problem. It's here's some money, go do something new and exciting.
And a condition of many of those grants is that you show an investment within your general
Right.
fund over time.
Right, there's a code.
Right. So the solution of looking for grants and I'm chasing right now, we need a new generator here. Ours is at best questionable, and we're chasing whether or not there is an emergency space designation of this building. And then are there any funds available to help offset that $1,000? We chase that, because that's a capital expense that we can try and
But that's
shift
nothing-
over to somebody else.
That's something we can figure into budget.
Unlikely to
project-
get it into the ed spending number.
Okay.
So do people feel comfortable then with the not to increase ed spending by, or ed spending to increase by framework?
Yes.
Which one feels better? Not to exceed or to increase by?
I keep remembering the gentleman that came to the Finance and Facilities Committee meeting and said, what does it cost us? And what exactly do we need? Do we ever really look at exactly that? And that scrubbing would do exactly that. And show us where we could build from there. But that would give us a baseline to operate from.
And for context. as we've talked before, this is not our first year tackling a difficult budget cycle. We did deep scrubbing to get FY 26 to be less spending than FY 25. So I don't want to pretend that this deep scrubbing is gonna unearth large sums of money, because we found everything we could find last year. So like we've gone to that level already. So there's less there to go find. We're gonna go look for it. But I want to just acknowledge that deep dive that we did last year, which still came up short because we still pulled money from other places that we would rather not have to get a budget where we needed it to be.
He's searching for nickels, not dollars now.
I think some of the creativity that happens with the zero-based budgeting is like, can we borrow from one place, like, and I know we just signed a lease or whatever, but, or contract, but like, what would it look like to float a year of not paying rent, be in a building, and what would that save? It'd be uncomfortable, but it'd be creative, and it would save what dollars, and then, right, and so like thinking about all those creative pockets that would allow us to shift from where we are to where we'd like to be. And it'll be uncomfortable.
And not without cost.
Not with, well, I'm not talking about retrofitting. I'm talking about literally just plug in place and exist in a space, right?
Right.
So,
But even that, there is a cost.
Sure,
associated.
sure. Not as much as.
Not as much
fitting.
as, correct.
Right,
That is the rent.
right.
Not as much as the upfitting, whether or not as much as the
Yeah.
rent would be a question, I think, because even like. In theory, yes, Floyd, Katrina, Beth and I can all be in a big classroom at Mount Aid. In reality. That actually doesn't work. We can't do our jobs, so the four of us in a space like that. Talking over one another, having sensitive conversations with a whole range of people. So even if you took that example, like you've got to build some sort of partitions in there to create those fours, like, so there's cost beyond just the. Moving company to move the chairs over or whatever, and the space has to be conducive to the different type of work that's happening in there than.
Totally.
A classroom of 25 kids.
And it's worth
Sure.
thinking about.
Of course.
So I'll just throw something out. 7.3% increase in health premiums, 6 and 6.25% negotiated salary increases, right, contractually based, you already know transportation. Fed Reserve, based on a quick Google search, says 2 to 2.2% inflation next year. The projection, but it's what we have right now. That gave you the 5.05% increase in your best case. That's where I feel comfortable. Based on quick math in my brain, it is fucking night.
I was just leaving it at 5%.
Let's see if it's like, as one of the options, like we were looking for options, so I was throwing.
And that kept a flat revenue, so presumably then the ed spending goes up.
Yep.
Somewhere close to that 5%.
Something up for action, so if you don't like it, let me know. But I like it.
I think I like it as a baseline, and I think we'd wanna see like.
The other option.
What
Yeah.
are the
Yeah.
ways that you could go lower?
Absolutely,
Then
that was more like status
Love it.
quo, yeah, like we know this is gonna go up, we know we have these negotiated. We know potentially a 2% inflation, so that was almost like,
So if we set that as the cap,
yes, that's what I was,
Okay,
I'm sorry,
all right.
I probably just didn't say.
I'm good with that.
Okay, so a best case cap,
Best case kind of.
and then what? So that's like base budget is best case, and then what? Did we want any of those other options we talked about? What would it look like?
I would think so,
I would think so.
because we would wanna know what, I mean, if the best case doesn't come in, and even if the best case does, right now, that's still projecting in some towns a 12% tax increase. I don't know if we're gonna feel comfortable ending at that point.
No.
We might.
$90 million.
Not.
That's at $90 million.
And
right?
that's with $90 million one time fund, so I think it's a fine place to start.
Yep.
But then we need to see scenarios where there's less spending.
Okay. So then would be in the less.
500,000 less than that, and a
Okay.
million less than that, or something like that, or 750,000 and 1.5 million might give us a bigger range. But it also might get us to the point where we're worried about having to identify particular positions that might not actually need to be identified.
So 500, 750, and 1.5.
Oh, I don't know, I mean,
I'm just.
I could say like 500,000 or 1 million, or 750 and 1.5, depending on how far we wanna spread it. I don't wanna make him do 4 scenarios.
So, that would be 4, right?
No, so do you,
The base and
do you
then-
have 1 million or 1 million as one possibility, or do 750,000 and 1.5 million? So you're gonna do 3 scenarios total. I just don't know if you end at 1.5 or if you end at 1.
Well, and I'm struggling a little bit because the first proposal was 5% increase on the ed spending, and now we've talked about 1.5, so that.
Well,
is
you have
one,
you have a
and
number
then
of that though, right?
500,000 less than that and 1.5 less than that?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yes.
Like that 1.7,
7.
thank you, I did scroll past that. And looking at the 275,000, right, like using 500,000, I'm gonna use round numbers, get late, right, that's a 2%, a million is 4%, based on that, 1% is equal to 275,000.
Someone's gonna have to describe the scenarios to me. I'm lost in it.
Same.
They're still
Yeah.
coming.
I mean, I thought I understood it. at
I
one
know.
point.
I'm also lost
guess
in the
the $2
numbers a bit.
Like 2 and 4% feels. Alright.
Okay, so,
So 5%, 4%, 2%? Increase on ed spending.
Yes,
so 5%, 4%.
2%.
Sorry, that was not the way I meant it. I apologize. So 5%, so it starts at the 1.76. And then if you were to reduce 500,000, that's kind of like reducing 2%, right? 'Cause you were saying 1% equals 275, again.
Yeah.
Round amount. And then reducing 1 million in spending on the tax rate would be like a 4% based on that.
We're talking about different percentages though, so we were talking about percent
Yes,
of
we are.
ed spending.
I'm sorry, yes, I was just equating it to
Yeah.
the tax rate, what we were talking.
It doesn't quite equate that, way, unfortunately, because a 2% change on the tax rate isn't necessarily then 2% change on the ed spending.
No, I know that,
No, you're
sorry,
saying-
I was just doing the math.
I think you're saying one target is 1.7 million increase, another is 1.2 million increase, and another is 700,000 increase. 4 million.
Yeah, whatever number we land on, yep.
Right.
Say it again, please.
So 1
Yeah.
million,
Well, again, we're not
1.2 and
deciding the whole, but
1.7.
one possibility is our best case budget forecast is an increase of $1.763 million
In ed spending.
in ed spending. And then the idea would be, we could also see what would the changes, the proposed changes to be to come to a budget that was a less increase in that. Instead of 1.7, we might see 1.2 million. So we have to find $500,000 of less spending to get to that. And then either
Yeah.
an increase of 1 million or 700,000, to see what would further cuts look like. Knowing that with each increment that we're cutting, we're also reducing the consequent tax impact. Though we don't know how much based on all the other assumptions, is the short idea.
Got it, thanks.
Board's thumbs on that idea?
I think so.
Yeah.
I didn't know what it
We
was.
just before, so
Yeah, I
rather
want,
than, but
Okay.
even, yeah, so 1.7. So an increase of ed spending of $1.7 million.
Over current year.
Yep, an increase of ed spending of $1.2 million.
Yeah.
And then I heard 2 different numbers
Yeah,
for the other.
we weren't sure which, I don't really care.
I don't, like, somebody else weigh in, 700, okay,
And then
750 or
an
something.
increase of
750. So then I'm starting down, then a million.
of about 750. And I reckon, so
About.
that you know, and we've had a history, so I think this has been okay, like it's about.
Yes.
Those numbers.
100%. We just made them up right now, and you
Right.
can play around with real numbers to
Okay.
get to something that seems valuable.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I didn't get the last increment I had.
750, 750K,
So 750, 1.2
2,
and
1.7.
Okay,
Does that feel?
and when that comes back, that'll also show the increase in actual dollar amount taxes. Thank you.
Projected, not actual.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And probably a range of projections, right? Based on what happens.
Split out of our
So we'll project each town, probably not a range for each town, like we'll say, this is the assumption we're using. And here's the subsequent tax rate using those assumptions.
You can show it in tax rates and
Liz.
compare it to previous tax rates by town.
Liz, you had your hand up?
Sure.
It'll be like you've
So-
seen in prior. budgets.
So how do those numbers correspond to the increase, right? Because we've stayed around 1% in the past year, right? So that's where those numbers came from, was percent increase on ed spending? Is that what that was, or did we?
That
I
was
mean, it's fine
overall.
if not. Oh,
Those numbers that Floyd gave before, the average of 1.5 is not ed spending, that was total spending.
total spending. Okay, I just
And just
was
for clarity,
wondering if
ed
there was a
spending is
connection.
total expenditure, less revenue gives you ed spending. And that's the figure we're looking at so that we can allow revenue changes to be accounted for in the target.
Someone, does that make sense, Liz? You good? Okay. Someone who's confident. Please state that for Vicky.
Hold on,
Yeah,
you already have a motion on the floor, so I need you to
yes, that's what I'm
to
trying
vote
to get
again,
to.
because you already did a set budget target for FY 27, which
Yeah.
was, so you need to fail that one and then.
Can you amend it?
Because all your motion says now
Is
is,
set a budget
Set a
target
budget
to open the
target.
discussion.
I mean, I
Right.
just, yeah, I guess you could clarify, if you just want to clarify.
I think that's what I was
Okay.
hoping to do is clarify that.
Okay.
If someone feels confident in the wording of the direction we're sending Patrick. That would be wonderful.
So 3 budget targets, yeah.
3 budget targets, yep. Who made the original motion, Vicky?
Meredith.
You know, on there,
Who was the second did it?
Oh.
I move that we set 3 budget targets. One for a 1.750.
750.
Okay, one for a $750 increase.
$1,000.
$750,000.
Appreciate that.
Okay, let me start. I'm
1.2.
You got it.
okay.
You've got this.
Good.
Okay, you got it, it's right here.
Deep breath.
Okay. One. So I move that we set 3 targets. Budget target.
Meredith, can I suggest you that the board directs the administration to.
Yes,
That's what I heard her say. I heard.
I
her
also
say
heard that.
This is gonna break my brain. The board,
It's okay, just start from the numbers.
Yeah.
She heard you say it.
thank you. Target number 1. A $750,000 increase in the ed fund.
Spend. Yep, it's been, yep.
In the ed spend, that's what I said.
Sorry.
In the ed spend.
Is it ed spend or is it top lines?
Ed.
It was Ed.
Oh my God.
Okay, you got it, you got it.
Target number 2. A $1.2 million increase in the ed spend. Target number 3. A $1.7 million increase in the ed spend.
My second motion.
Well, Melissa had this. Yeah. Okay.
Oh, you're already.
Yeah.
That's not really, so job.
That roasting. Fundamentally.
Can I read it back?
Please, yep.
The board directs the administration to develop 3 budget targets. A $750,000 increase in educational spending. B, a $1.2 million increase in educational spending. C, a $1.7 million increase in educational spending.
7.5. Right? Or was it 7?
That's-
1.7.
7, okay, 7. Yeah.
It's in the realm of Patrick.
It's
that
in the,
flexibility.
yeah, the flexibility.
Yeah.
Yep, okay. All those in favor of setting the budget target for fiscal year 27 as outlined, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next is an action item for the career change incentive. Can I get a motion to open? For the career change incentive, please. So moved. Melissa first. I'll second it. No, I'll give Justin. Okay, so each year around this time, we talk about the career change incentive, and I'm gonna let Patrick sort of take over, because he knows more. Are people familiar with what the career change incentive is? Okay, so please, thanks.
So the career change incentive in the contract offers someone who takes advantage of it, if the board makes it available. The equivalent of 2/3 of their salary. That can be applied in a few different ways. It can be in a cash payout. It can be applied to purchase airtime, which is sort of retirement years in the retirement system. Or it can be used to purchase health insurance. Or any combination of those 3 things. The important takeaway from that is the sort of dollar amount. So these are generally folks that are higher on the pay scale because they're veteran teachers that are, you have to be in the system for 20 years to make yourself available to it. So it's 2/3 of sort of the upper end salaries on our pay scale. Somewhere in the neighborhood of $90,000. So 2/3 of that is the dollar equivalent. It's an opportunity to create attrition. when there's intent to take advantage of attrition. So when someone takes advantage of this, if that position isn't filled, we likely realize some savings from that we can take advantage of. When someone takes advantage of this and then we have to fill that position, it might actually cost more money to the district to do this, in particular as healthcare costs become a higher and higher percentage of the total compensation, right? So, you know, if a veteran teacher who, you know, has a high salary, but maybe doesn't have the full family insurance plan leaves, and we hire someone in that's maybe lower on the salary scale, but has a more expensive insurance package, those costs come closer to washing each other out, and now we're still on the hook for the 2/3 of that person's salary in a career change incentive. So that's more or less sort of the idea behind it. We have not offered this for several years now. I think it can be an effective tool when we're in a position where we want to create a lot of attrition that we're then prepared to take advantage of. To use this to create a lot of attrition that we're gonna then need to fill is less of a financially wise strategy. The conversation that has ensued isn't suggesting that next year's the year we're gonna make some big move in structural change that we want to create attrition to then take advantage of. That's perhaps in the subsequent year. So I think that's part of what you'll need to think about as to whether or not it's wise to offer this for next year or not. The reason it's on the agenda for tonight with all of the unknowns that we have is we have to notify MAEA by November 1 per contract of the board's decision to offer this or not, and how many slots you open up.
I think this is a year that we really could use as many veteran teachers as we can keep.
I'm sorry, I was out momentarily. How many incentive units are you talking about, Patrick? I mean, is there a number that you're looking for? Okay, so it's a general, is it general incentive? So you don't really know what the.
The board gets to set how many it wants to offer.
Okay, and is that, did I miss something? Is that on the table right now?
That's it, yeah, we're discussing that, yeah,
The number?
not the number specifically, but whether or not we're gonna offer it,
And when would we need to discuss how many?
if we decide we're gonna offer it,
Tonight?
yeah.
I see.
I would move that we do not offer this option this year.
I would support that.
I moved it last year too.
Other thoughts?
It's interesting. Have we done this in the past? If
It's
so,
been several years, but yes,
been-
and it's sort of a distant past now, I'd say.
what kind, I think I do remember. What was the response in terms of I guess, the types of teachers or, or positions that took advantage of that? Was that a good result in terms of skewing one way or the other in terms of type of position, or did it cause problems? You know what I mean?
I don't know what kind of, I don't remember it causing problems. I don't know that it I don't know that yielded lots of savings because we weren't necessarily in a position to absorb all the reductions of those positions. And I think the context is a little different. It's probably been, I bet it's been 7-ish years since we've offered this. Healthcare premiums are probably 300 or 400% higher today than they were 7 years ago. So that's a pretty significant
So it's more
factor. So I think I think it's harder for this to produce financial savings.
Okay.
Now than it used to be because of that healthcare premium variable. And that's not to suggest that there aren't other reasons that this might be a good idea, but from a financial perspective, if we're not prepared to absorb almost every one of the people that take advantage of this, I think we would perhaps not see financial savings.
So,
And it might actually cost us money.
what's the argument in favor of this?
It creates attrition when you are in a position to want to take advantage of attrition. I mean, that's effectively,
It would create attrition, but it wouldn't save money. Right?
if someone leaves and you don't feel that, if this creates attrition, i.e. causes someone to leave their job. And you don't fill that job. Then it saves some money. If this causes someone to leave their job. And that's a position we can't have unfilled and we fill it, it probably costs us more money than if that person had just stayed.
I would say it could potentially save us money, but also decrease the number of RIFs we may potentially have to.
Right. And that was sort of what I meant in terms of there may be other good reasons that, instead of a RIF, if we felt like we were gonna have to go that route.
Somebody's leaving who wants to leave.
Right.
What's the likelihood that you would have to rehire somebody who took advantage of this?
That's
Rehire their position.
That's the challenge, because this is available to all professional positions covered by the collective bargaining agreement, so.
20 plus years.
Mhm. And it would be very much subject to. The person who's in a position to be able to do this and takes advantage of it, and that, like, if. If we think about Mount Aid, for example, there are some departments, as you saw from all the calculations in the document that I prepared for you. There are some departments that are currently much more tightly staffed than others. If a math teacher left, for example, we would probably need to replace that math teacher. If it's a teacher from a different department, maybe that department could absorb that reduction and we wouldn't have to fill. So it's very much subject to a case by case basis, hard to predict.
Liz?
So it's really thinking about staffing rules and what A1 looks like played out. I feel like I have a hard time judging that.
If we knew we were making a decision that the only way to achieve that budget target was going to incur risks, then this tool could reduce the number of risks we have taken. And therefore reducing the impact.
But not necessarily. So if the risk
But
you're
not
gonna
necessarily.
make is a new dance teacher and the person that took the retirement as a math teacher. They may not have the qualification to fill that slot, correct? So
Could we wait? Or we have to make a decision tonight?
We would have to enter into a side letter. So we have to make a decision tonight so that we can notify MAEA. We could have a conversation with MAEA about. If we'd like to offer this in December, would you accept that? We'd have to effectively be a side letter to the agreement. Because the agreement very clearly stipulates November 1, MAEA must be notified.
I still don't wanna lose veteran staff at a time when there's so much uncertainty. Statewide, nationwide. That's why I don't think we should do it right now. But I don't know if that's selfish, if that doesn't make any sense.
Anyone have an opposing view to that?
I feel like it could be a good tool if we knew if we had, a little bit further down the road. That's why I asked.
And I do want to just clarify, there's sort of a reason for the November 1. If the board offers this, that may prompt someone to consider taking advantage of it, which may mean they need to get in line at the state teacher's retirement. To understand, is this really a viable option for me or not, and get that information and make an informed decision. So it's intended to give time for the individual to, because I'd have to check to see, we notify them of how many positions, if any, by November 1. And there's a date by which they have to say, yes, I'd like to take advantage of this or not. But it's I think it's within the budget building window.
Is it first come, first served? So like, if
By
we say
seniority.
by
I
seniority.
think it's by seniority. I double check, but I think it's by seniority.
Okay.
Mostly it's the first.
Has there been any discussion with staff about this issue and how they feel about that?
Well, only, I mean, there certainly are some that would love to take advantage of this. It's a pretty significant financial windfall to an individual that takes advantage of this, so that's very appealing to some.
Right, but we don't have any general sense of, I mean, it sounds like a lot of what we're talking about is. Trying to maintain staff morale, around RIFs, not RIFs, that kind of stuff in addition. So I was just wondering whether there was any sense about whether they, as a group, and that might be hard to do, as a group felt that that was something that would help.
I would say we are well poised to offer it when the time comes that makes sense, because we haven't offered it for a while, right? If we offered it every year, then no one's necessarily, it's no longer really an incentive to generate attrition. It's just a benefit to kind of, right?
And it might be better fiscal year 27-28.
Agreed.
Absolutely. When the foundation formula hits,
Whenever that hits. Mhm.
if it is.
If it, yeah. How long you heard? So right now it's looking like we're leaning towards not offering it this year. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Who made the original motion? And so then you moved to not offering the career change incentives.
Yes.
And who seconded originally? Mary, me?
Yeah, oh, cool.
Do you still second?
I still second.
Friendly amendment? Does that make sense, Vicky? Is that a?
Yeah, to not adopt a career change incentive.
Right, right, to not offer the career change. Yep. All those in favor of not offering the career change incentive, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. We're gonna go into discussion F, which is the options for educational delivery. So we've all had a couple weeks to look at those. It sounds like, just in terms of what we've already said tonight and the way that we've been thinking about the budget, the A1 needs to be in our back pocket. So we can just take that one off the deliberation table for now, is that?
Oh,
Because it'll just be an option we're carrying through.
that wasn't my expect. Oh, that you can, what do you mean carrying through?
That we're keeping it as an option. We don't have to discuss it any further because it's just gonna stay. That's our base.
We're adopting A1 as one of our options.
As one of the options.
Okay, I mean, that's fine as far as it goes. But I had always envisioned A1 as something that was valuable to study going forward,
Right, yeah,
but there's. I don't think it's just a status quo thing,
sure.
right? And that's the way it's identified right now. What I tried to do when I presented some material last meeting was to say, yeah, it's an option to study going forward, but that study needs to include some real good look at cost savings, the cost effective mindset. I'd rather refer to this option as a cost effective mindset that it preserves, the elementary schools.
Yep.
So I would hope that, I mean, I'm certainly okay, and thank you, to move that forward. But I would hope that we would able to incorporate not just the notion that it's a status quo, but it's a starting point for figuring out how we can really redesign how we provide education, but using the same students that we have.
Yeah, I think the idea of this conversation is to make sure we're capturing which ones we do want to do that work with.
Okay,
And A1 is one of those that feels important to preserve as.
I won't
that.
look at it with gift toys.
I think
But I
I'm
just
trying
wanted
to
to add
take
that.
one thing off the plate,
Yes.
right?
I-
Like we can all.
Just wanted to add that gloss that I'm not, when I'm thinking of it moving forward, I don't see it as the status quo. It just is something that maintains the elementary school.
Okay.
Can I add another option? That,
What do you mean add another
like,
option?
guys talk about an option that I would like for us to discuss as to whether or not we want to just study it further.
Yep.
I would like to propose a hybrid I.4. Right now, we have I.4 Moncton and I.4 Robinson. And I would just like to call it I.4 3 schools. And we will evaluate if it makes more sense to close Moncton or Robinson over time, because I don't think we have enough information right now to determine what the better impact would be on students. The reason why I want to keep I.4 in the mix is the district advisory council letter in support of grade banding, as well as the teachers' support of PLC time and grade banding. And the community survey saying that they really valued improving opportunities for students. So for me, the I.4 with essentially grade banded 3 schools, and maybe we don't know the exact schools yet, but a grade banded 3 school option would be really important for me to see that we explore moving forward. How does everybody else feel about the I.4s?
How many are we looking to move forward tonight?
Yeah.
Because maybe we go both forward or do what you said.
Yeah.
It depends on the number.
Sorry, can I ask again, and you speak up a bit?
Sorry, I said, how many are we looking to approve tonight?
So I think the idea is to really start parsing away. Like if there are ones we're saying, we're not even gonna consider it, that feels important to chop. We have one. So 8.1, right? Those are the 16 original and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 6 left. 8.1 is already 1. So if we could get it down to 3 or 4, that would feel like a good next step. Knowing that, I guess there's 1, 2. 8, if you count the 2 that Truex did.
Yeah, okay, got it, yeah.
But like 3 or 4 would feel important, so we can actually do those really big deep dives into what it actually looks like. A being 1.
I really want us to talk about one of the I.4s or both of the I.4s. To me, based on the feedback that we've heard from the district advisory council and the staff, I think it feels important that we discuss those further so we can give them an answer as to whether or not we do want to move forward with grade banded option. I'm obviously in support of it, but I'm one person.
I think Meredith is making some sense there about, it's the same concept, right? It's just, different schools, right? And if I could just maybe add on to that, I think it's really important as we're going forward with some of these options that, maybe causing angst and, maybe in some communities and stuff like that, that we utilize the process. I mean, we're gonna have some more time here. And so I think we're gonna be able to, with that time, I think we're gonna be able to take a deeper dive into some of this stuff. And my whole concept has been, when you're talking about, closing a school or not closing a school for that matter. It's important to sort of look individually at each circumstances and sort of compare the educational outcomes, compare them. And so that's why, Meredith, I think that would make a certain amount of sense, taking a look at what are the education outcomes going to be if, this group of students move somewhere else, right? Well, and what are the financial options? I can recirculate what I did in August, but it's probably in everybody's back pocket at this point. But that kind of process, I think, would be really important. And I think dovetails into Meredith's stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Liz?
So I think what Meredith made sense in terms of the flexibility and exactly which school we're talking about, because I was thinking the same thing for I.6. An example would be pre-K not necessarily being at the Beeman School, for instance, right? So I think that makes sense. I also though see options, um, other options is having grade banding, not just the 1.4 options. I also see 1.6 as being grade banding, and H and G1 are also grade banding options, right? Because those are situations where all the students of a grade are together. So I don't think we're limited just to the 1.4s in terms of looking at grade banded options. I think any of those ones, 1.6, 1.4, H and G1 all include grade banding.
Yep, go ahead, Melissa, sorry. You're sorry, Liz, were you done? I didn't want to cut it off, I apologize. You're good, okay.
Can we just go through them? A, B, C, and like eliminate or say, put on the side to,
Yeah.
and then then we can whittle down a little bit further. I don't know.
I love that
Organized
idea.
chaos.
Let's do
That's what I
it.
was going for.
So A, we already said.
Read it. Yep, so we're on B.
Yeah.
I am not in favor of B. Because it gets rid of the middle school model and it does not address grade banding. And I think several of the administrators have put B in their no-go file. I would want to see scenario B eliminated.
Other
I'm also
thoughts?
not a fan of B.
Agreed.
My least favorite.
Thumbs up on not pursuing B? Unless you have-
So let me just add something here. My sense is that the group is not in favor of this.
It sounds that way, kinda, yeah.
Which has always puzzled me a little bit. Because we have a neighbor to our north who has a really, really good reputation and is able to do that. I know the different circumstances, bigger school district, bigger schools. I just, I'm not gonna push it. I just don't get it. There's a neighbor to the north who's doing a great job. And I'm not, it just mystifies me a little bit, but, I'm not gonna push it.
Or do you want me? Like, was that a rhetorical question or do you want me to tell you why?
It was, no, I don't wanna belabor it.
Sorry,
Just because, 9:20.
understood. I will, maybe I'll send you an email. We can run copy.
Well, give me a call.
Oh, I would love that. Let's do it.
So the majority of thumbs are up though for not continuing with B as of right now. Is that accurate, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we're gonna move on then to E.
I don't love E because it doesn't have gradient.
I do love E, because I think that it will give us the biggest bang for our educational buck by having all of our students together finally. And the options that are available to those students would be greater with a larger student body. And it will also give more professional learning opportunities for folks when you're all housed in one building, basically.
I'm looking at that one.
You're looking at E, so you've got Moncton K5,
Okay,
Bristol pre-K through 5. And then you've got you move the sixth graders to
Okay,
Monday,
yes,
which is
sorry.
what we tried last year.
Yeah.
So. And you've got a concentration of children that also look at it. Bristol is centrally located. They're already coming to Mount Abe, they'll be going there for sixth grade. Moncton will certainly meet the needs for the other end of the county, or the other end of the district, and they'll all be going together as sixth graders.
That's a really compelling argument.
Can someone put up a list that we have the list of the 7 you narrowed before. But if you're adding some other choices, can someone show them on the screen?
we can show them, but there's no additional choices. This is scenario E.
I think there was
Then
the
you're
two X columns, one
Okay,
that were
I'm
meant.
sorry.
The Truex column.
So whether
I
that's something or not,
misunderstood.
I'm not sure.
I think the one thing that I'm concerned about with this is you're looking at probably a $9 million bond. but the overall savings, you look at the longitudinal projected savings is under $700 million.
I'm also, this one also stood out for me. I was also curious, so the amount aid underutilization stood out for me as I went through these slides and I don't know if I'm allowed to do this, but I'm gonna just throw this out there. Because it says 50% utilization, which must mean we're less utilization right now, because we have 7 to 12, not 6 to 12, is how could we utilize it better? And so I was curious if we could then move central office into Mount Aid to better utilize that space as part of this scenario.
Kristen?
Just a clarifying question on these scenarios. Since modified by Truex Collins with with the bond information. Do the same numbers apply for the assumed positions that would be eliminated from the August 20th email that had that information in it? Is that safe to assume all those?
Yeah.
I don't think, Truex Collins dollar numbers can include those, or Truex Collins is simply the facility costs.
Includes the personnel.
It does, thank you,
Yep.
thank you, Kristen, for that clarification.
I don't have a problem with studying it, but this would probably be my least favorite. I understand the cost savings issue, Kathy. It obviously calls for having all 2 elementary school. You know, we can try to balance that out and try to study, you know, what the impact on kids would be if you do that. It just seems like one of the more radical kind of options out there. I don't mind studying it, but just thought I'd let folks know what I think about it.
Liz?
I just, yeah, the only thing that I feel like I'm missing when I'm looking at the cost modeling summary and the MAUSD reconfiguration options table with staff feedback is just that they don't both, that the 2 new ones are missing from there. And that one has the 30-year savings and one has the net projected savings based on all of those staffing charts that backed it up. Right. So that's really, those are the 2 that I'm using to make these decisions with. And if whatever we move forward with, it would be great to consolidate, to put these charts together so they included the bonding and the net savings from the staffing, like the last question that was asked.
The
Have it
truck
all
scenarios-
together.
The trick scenarios did utilize all the behind the scenes spreadsheets that had all the staffing details, so they are accounted for in the same way. And that's part of that total savings. It just doesn't show you in a 1-year time frame what savings could be expected. It projects it out over 30 years. And the reason 30 years was selected was because if you're doing a bond, that's a typical bond length, so.
So the 1 year then might also be helpful addition to it, or like maybe just a shorter time frame on that as well. But thank you. That does help a lot to just look at one chart now. Thanks.
When we look at scenario E, and this is one of the questions I have, what happens to central office? I mean, if there,
That's where I said,
Yeah,
could we utilize that
could-
aid to move central office in there?
would there be enough, if we move 6th grade into Mount Aid, is there still enough room to move central office over as well?
According to the notes on the right, Kathy, it says non-aid is underutilized, approximately 50% utilization, like 75% is standard.
Right, but I don't know how much percentage with all the 6th graders would be coming from the other 3 schools.
Well, and this is where it may be helpful to conceptualize what the next round of sort of exploration could look like.
Okay.
We would take these scenarios and we would really start to go like building by building, placing classrooms with numbers of kids in them and where are the interventionists going to be and where are the counselors going to be, like getting down to that level of detail, which will then highlight what space is available. And is there enough space that would be conducive to moving central office in and all those? So we would get to that level of granularity that we aren't quite at yet, because we're still more conceptual than down to that level of detail. Conceptually, for me, in any one of these, like, for me, where central office lands is more or less an afterthought. Like, let's do what makes sense for kids first, and then we'll like. In a school, not in a school, in this school, in that school, in this wing, like. That's irrelevant. Like, we go where we need to go as central office to make this all work. I'd rather it not drive the bus. But fit in wherever we have.
Yeah, well, that's why I mentioned it, and it's like a fitting.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was, and I also want to be respectful, but one of the reasons for buying the building in Bristol, when that was put up a couple of years ago, was that there was a feeling that the superintendent's office should not be in an active school building.
That is a consideration.
But we're saying that that's out, that we make it work wherever we put you.
I think most districts are shifting to that in effort to be cost effective and thinking about that. Also, doesn't have to influence our thinking, but all the rest of Addison County districts have 2 or 3 operating elementary schools instead of their original 5 or 6. With Middlebury looking to consolidate again. Doesn't have to be our district, but it's just curious. How they're doing that, and I wonder if there's learning to be done from those. Is your hand up from before or now, Liz?
Just one more thought, and then that we would also, the bond, right, because they were different, they went off of one version of the NESDEC capacity, but there was also a reconfiguration capacity, so the bonds that they put forward that might be needed for construction to house the students we have, where there's varying opinions on that work, right? Because they use the lesser of the capacity options at each school, if I'm understanding, rather than the greater of the capacity range. So the bonds aren't necessarily as significant as they say they are. And also, I mean, if we think about consolidation of districts, right, if that were to happen, there wouldn't be as many district offices, right? If Addison County was one district, we wouldn't have our own office. So I don't know how that makes me think of it differently, but yeah, the bonds. Yeah.
And if we had one Boches cooperative, not just the district, right, Liz? You know, if you had some other configuration like a Boches or something like that, you'd probably have just, you know, a single central office type.
It sounds like though in BOCES, they each have their own superintendent and then they share resources in terms of other student services, is what I understand, but I could be wrong.
I do a lot of work within New York BOCES, I'm sorry to interrupt you, I just like I'm gonna like go and present to them in a couple of weeks, like I talk a lot, and the BOCES have not affected the member of central offices, it's just shared training and support services, so like. I don't know, like. Erie One BOCES, as an example.
Yeah.
Works with multiple districts that each have their own central office, so.
I think the Vermont statute is a little more flexible maybe than what they have over in New York. So I could envision, you know, a Boches kind of thing where you'd have some significant savings around consolidation of central office service.
Makes sense. You definitely know more about this than me.
What's that?
You know more about this than me.
Yeah, well, sometimes I project.
So I guess if you could do thumbs up if yes to scenario E moving forward for further review. Sideways.
Come on, Liz, up or down?
Brad, so 1, 2, 3. Brad, what did you have? Thumb up. Five,
You get
six.
Justin?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And a sideways thumb. I can't see Sarah's thumb.
Sarah, yes or no?
7 is majority. So we'll move it forward. All right, F.
I have complicated feelings about F. I like that it's grade banded. but I don't like that there's a significant amount of new construction needed and 25% utilization at Mount Abe. I think options I.4 and I.6 do a better job of what option F is getting at than option F. So,
Other thoughts?
Yeah, those were my thoughts as well. Underutilization is one of the big issues that I have with this one from Mount Aid.
I had a problem with looking at 531 students in a facility and in a site that may not be able to accommodate it appropriately.
Any other thoughts? So thumbs up if no to option F. Here, thumbs up if you do not want it.
Not wanted.
Do not want it. Okay, no to F. Okay, and then there's the two others from Truex, but it sounds like we liked the I options. I was a hard no, why don't you want?
Yeah.
So right now we have A1 and E. And then some form of I. I's, 9.4, no, because there's a 9.6. Yeah, I.4, I.6.
We take H out?
So, I mean, I'm sort of lumping together IHG because they seem to be very close to everything, with H being the most dramatic for sure. I'm not sure I want to explore H1. So, and there's G.1 too, right?
We crossed you one
Oh,
off.
I missed that. Okay, good, fantastic, love it. Moving on to H. Moving right along. H is also done.
I'm losing track of the list. I thought we had 7 that we were choosing.
Yeah.
There's the two from Truex Collins from last time, I think that are.
They're on the table?
Well, they're
They're not
like,
anymore.
they're like stacked into some of the I, like,
Oh,
they're stacked into some of the Is, but I think that we're.
I wasn't, I missed it. Yeah, I just, I remember them talking about that. I
Right.
just didn't remember, I didn't think that they were on our list of options and choose.
I didn't think they were either.
So I think we're in the Is, is where I was headed.
Oh, yeah,
I
Yeah, let's
wasn't
do-
considering H or G.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I know there's strong objections over there.
Nope.
Okay.
Does anybody want to hear my I.4 sales pitch again, or do you want to feel like we're on?
I-4
Well, maybe both.
Can we talk about I6 first? And then talk about the two that are the most similar.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
Go for it.
I6. What do we got?
The staff seemed pretty against moving fifth grade
Yeah.
into the high school.
That was my thought.
Yeah.
Plus, I think it is the option that would result in the most teachers losing their job too. wouldn't it?
Yeah, 20.45. And Beeman, if memory serves, would require quite a bit of maintenance. Even more so than at least one that would be proposed to be closed.
Liz?
I mean, you can look at it as the most loss, or you can look at it as the greatest, almost like A1 is an extreme. G1, H, I.6, all of these, if we're just looking at I.6 now, it's also the greatest stability and the greatest opportunity to rethink and programming and access and all of the different things that we noted in our ends report we want to make progress on while staying sustainable. So yeah, I hope that we don't, it almost feels important to have something on the other end that is really seeing, to me, what feels like the greatest potential for access to programming and getting a universally accessible school and all of those different things, like all of the things that I feel like are the dream, become more possible with the greatest long-term spending stability. So, that's how I look at that.
That's very compelling, Liz.
I don't know. I don't know about the fifth grade part like that. I'm thinking about my sixth grader right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on the fifth grade, having a fifth grader, I'm like, ooh, got one.
Even sixth grade, yes, so working in a middle school right now and seeing just like the. Yeah, it's a big difference between fifth and sixth and six and eight.
Yeah.
But, so I.6 to me it does feel like there's a lot of opportunity baked in, but I wonder if an I.4 could get at some of that idea too, with further exploration of that. Then I like the idea of a middle school model and sort of what we could do with that. And not dig too deep into our elementary schools. For kids,
So are we voting no on 5.6?
I don't know.
Or,
I haven't
or do you
done-
want to just stick with where we were at and follow sequentially here?
Well, right now we're discussing 9.6, so it feels like we should just follow that through, but, are there any other thoughts on 9.6 that feel important to share before? So. And like super inconsistent, let us thumbs up if you do not want I.6. Do not want I.6. If you do not want to explore I.6.
I don't want to.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm not using my thumb.
Okay, majority rule, so no I.6. I.4 then. I.41. Mhm.
I thought Meredith.
Yeah.
Is Meredith's concept on the table? I mean, I think she was thinking about.
Yeah.
The different.
Together, so it's I.4 as opposed to 2.
Hear my sales pitch again?
Yeah,
For one deal, who can pass it for one deal?
yeah, do this pitch again, I guess.
It is a two-fold.
I would just like to call it I.4.
That's
And
right.
say we will close Beaman, and as we do further study, well, let me be very clear, we will put it to the town of New Haven to vote whether or not they want to close Beaman. And then we will do additional study to see whether it makes more sense to put it to the town of Moncton to close MCS or to put it to the town of Starksboro to close Robinson. So just even maybe to the town of Bristol to close Bristol Elementary. So just a general 8.4 that assumes that we have one pre-K through 2 school, one 3 through 5 school, and 6 through 12 at 9. And we can, as we do further study, determine which 2 schools we'll put to the towns to vote to close.
That's okay with me. I just want to reiterate, the idea that I had before in terms of how we're going to go about that process.
Yeah.
So we talked about 3 potential different, but potential schools closing. And I think it's really, really important that we provide those communities with due process.
Yes.
And have it structured in a way that you try to show parents, kids are gonna be better off, right? So you gotta get into the weeds in terms of outcomes and all sorts of different factors, and I hope that we can pursue that process as we're going through all 3 of them.
Yeah, 100%
I-
agree.
And I agree. And we've been contacted by many of our stakeholders about this very issue and some of the conversations that have happened at this meeting in regards to Starksboro and New Haven constituents, many of them feel in a very similar way. So I think it's going to be really important to do exactly that, to be transparent and to really show the examples of why we think this, may or may not work.
So in that case, I think we should look at keeping one I.4.1 and I.4.2. So that we do exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
I also don't wanna assume that Bristol Elementary is the school we keep open either. I would like to see what it would look like to potentially close Bristol and maybe keep one of our other town schools open too. That's why I just wanted to keep it super open for I.4 with one pre-K through 2 school, 1 through 5 school, and 1 6 through 12 school. So we're not limiting ourselves and exploring what the best outcome for kids would be in that model.
Liz?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. So if we're moving forward with A1, E, and I.4, I mean, we do have some stuff that we can go back on in terms of what's accessible, the Truex report, and work needed, capacity, all of that, right? So I do hope that maybe that's one of the earlier things that we could figure out is which buildings are the most sustainable and meet student needs as is, with as least work needed and as least investment needed moving forward. So I think that's something. And what's interesting about E and I is that some of the information could overlap if we are keeping it flexible, because E was Bristol and Moncton, Mount Abe. And then these are Bristol, Moncton, Mount Abe, Robinson, right? So I guess some of the information could overlap, and maybe that'd be a good place to really start making the information accessible about the buildings. I mean, it was in the Truex report, right? We kind of have that about the reasons why for which buildings. But maybe playing it out a little bit deeper into what the classrooms would look like would be helpful to do that.
One of the things I look at, I understand where you're coming from, Mary, but I also look at, it doesn't make sense to me as an educator, as a parent, and as a fiscal agent to move the largest student body anywhere else in the district. I mean, 276 students at the projection, to start moving those just doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't disagree with that. I think and maybe this isn't the right term, but for the sake of equity, like, let's look at all of the different scenarios, just so that everybody has the information as it is across the board.
And if we're gonna do grade banding anyway, thinking about that in a really global way would make good sense. So I think we're all, and I think we need to be really clear, like, there's equity in the movement too, right? There's equity in that.
But
So
all this is sort of the future steps. of
this is all very
Not to
futuristic,
try to push us along, but
No,
if there's general consensus that as a third scenario,
5.4.
some version of I.4 feels good.
yep,
It
thumbs
feels
up.
like we're in a good place to say, yep, let's do that, and then figure out the details
Yep.
when we study further.
I agree with you, Mike.
Okay,
So
sorry, but
I'm going to ask for an action item.
Wait, hold on, do we need to do thumbs on I.4?
Do you wanna do thumbs up on I.4? Thumbs up if you'd like I.4 and in some iterative form
This guy.
to study.
there you go.
Okay, yes. Great. So now I'll ask for an action item about the options to advance for further study.
Not gonna be me this time.
I'm
Sorry,
happy
that was
to move that we advance for further study option 8.1. An amended I.4 and option E.
A second?
Second,
Thank you. All those in favor of moving forward 8.1, I.4 amended and E for further study, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay,
So my question is, will the next step be, this goes back to Truax Collins and for that deeper dive that they talked about in the last presentation?
Yeah, I'm sort of envisioning, maybe even bringing Truax Collins to an advisory council meeting, so we can get sort of the educational expertise and the architectural expertise together and talk through all those details that need to get fleshed out at this next level.
and then I think there's a lot of other things to bake out, to consider, and not just the buildings, but.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering what our process was.
Yeah.
Outside.
I don't,
Yeah.
yeah,
So there's the analysis part, and then there's the political part that is very real as well, and
and lots of,
both processes are very important to pay attention to. I'm thinking about it from that next layer of information gathering with Truax.
Right, but the analytical part, in my mind, I envision will include not just the facility stuff, which is important, but also the educational analysis and the comparison of, this versus that. How's that kid gonna do in this school? If you're gonna move them to the other, I think that's an important piece of it, both educationally and politically.
And transportation.
I would add, I would add that if you haven't looked at the NESCAC study that Patrick shared, in 10 years, it's 160 kids less than we have now. So I think that if we're not looking at that as at least being in the mix of discussion and projections, we're gonna chase our tail again in 10 years.
many things to put into this, and I will do my best to come up with a scaffold. And then we can plug and play with what I'm missing and what you all need to see, and we'll move the needle as we need to get what we need.
I appreciate that.
Okay,
Can I make a suggestion?
sure.
I think it will be clearer to us in our community if we, from this point forward, stop calling our options 8.1E and 8.4, and maybe call it 5 elementary schools, 2 K-5 schools, 2 grade band schools, or some that just
Solid what it is.
yeah, so that it's
Yeah.
easier to recognize
Okay.
what we're talking
I'll
about.
think about that as I'm scaffolding how to,
Good idea.
a reframe on label.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think I made that comment about A1. I don't think it's appropriate to call it status quo. Because I think we're talking about something other than status quo.
5 elementary schools, or sorry, 5 schools, 4 elementary schools.
Okay. I'm gonna open the floor to public comment.
It's been really wonderful discourse and I'm glad to be able to witness it. Thank you. I really appreciate the time and consideration that you're all putting into it. And thank you for giving a stand for the voting element. I really think that's important and the community trust. And so thank you. I do hope that future study will also not just include the use of physical space, but also time, and maybe a study of how Heinsberg has used their, they have weekly professional development half days on Wednesday, and there's a whole expanded ELP offering on that day, and there are businesses that have been created to support after-school education. And so think about other ways that we could utilize our time as a resource so that there can be professional learning communities that maybe take the place of necessary grade banding, if that's not the option that's chosen. I don't know, it's 10 o'clock, so I've lost my brain matter, but I really appreciate the discussion and thank you for your analytical approach.
Thanks, Karen.
Yep. I heard that there were studies about, possible population drops, just a few minutes ago. And, I mean, that could happen. But, I'm a baby boomer. I came in the 70s, to the area. And our schools were just building because of all the kids. Now my generation, myself, are aging out, you might say. And I just got a feeling in the next 10, 15 years, there's real possibility that as we die or move to some other housing, there could be, another sort of boom of younger people coming in and occupying our houses. So I just would keep that in mind when you're thinking of closing a school. Once it's gone, it's gonna be really expensive to replace. It might actually turn out that we do better to make an extra effort to keep them open as long as it isn't ridiculously expensive. With that in mind.
Is there any others who haven't spoken yet? Yeah, Nancy.
I would also add, besides the fact that many of us will be headed to the great beyond at some point, so housing will be available. Internet is expanding in our county in a big way. Through a community-based effort, and that's going to also make our region very attractive to people who might want to move this way. And the other factor that I think we're gonna really need to keep an eye on is what happens with the redistricting task force. The BOCES option, which they've kind of renamed, it's Community Service Agency, is going to be designed to save considerable money. And that may mean that it's gonna be possible, much more possible to keep all of our schools open. So that's really something to keep an eye on. The redistricting task force is also, I sat in on their meeting this afternoon, they're talking about regional high schools. Connected with tech centers. So that really could change the picture in terms of our planning as well, so.
Thank you, Nancy.
Yeah.
Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet? I want to offer a public comment. I think that's just classic. Okay, Karen.
Sure.
Yeah, just want to make sure.
Frequent flyer, I apologize. So I would just ask that this potential studies consider future census. I know in our town, there's a potential development of 30 to 50 new units going in, so not beyond the great beyond, we're adding to our housing. And we hope to be attracting new residents to the area because of the quality of education and the community that we have. So if you can think about the study of how land is being developed and utilized as part of the potential growth of the district, I think that's something to consider as well. We'd really love to be able to highlight quality of our schools in marketing residency.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Not seeing any. Next on our agenda is an executive session. Under T1 VSA 5313A3, which is an evaluation of a public officer. We'll take a motion in a minute.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks, everybody.